Chapter 1672. There's such a good deal. Buy one, get one free, and it's free to drink? Order a portion of soup base. I can drink until they close down. The man's words immediately caused a commotion in the crowd. Half the price and free wine. This event was way better than Mana hot pot restaurants countless times. Isn't hot pot just a pot of soup with vegetables added to it? The taste of every restaurant is different. Choose Kasha Hot Pot Restaurant. Everything is served in double portions, and you can drink as much wine as you want. The price is also affordable. Walk 500 meters forward. If you are late, you might not be able to get it. The man urged again with a smile. Go, go, go. Let's go try Kasha Hot Pot Restaurant and see what hot pot is. Many people began to turn and leave after hearing that. The people gathered at the entrance dispersed immediately. Manager, that's a smart move. The skinny man looked at the man who returned with a smile and gave him a thumbs up. He fawned over the man and said, not only did we ruin their business, but we also brought many customers to our hot pot restaurant. These are all small tricks. If it weren't for the fact that the boss didn't allow me to do it, I would have found a few fierce-looking demons to move a chair to the door. I wouldn't have to do anything, and he wouldn't be able to open for business, the man said with a smug smile. Why is the boss so afraid of this hot pot restaurant? The skinny man was puzzled. I didn't know before. I only heard the boss say that this restaurant has a very strong backer. The Marquis family met them, and even their patriarch was implicated. However, the one with the half-elf girl just now was the boss of Amy's. The opening flower basket had the words Miss Hill from the Buffett family and Miss Gloria from the family Moreton written on it. They're obviously not to be trifled with. The man sneered. However, in business competition, everyone has their own means. As long as we don't do anything illegal, even the city lord's castle can't do anything to us. Let's see if our Kasha can outlast them first, or if they can outlast us first. Wonderful, wonderful. With our boss's ability, he's naturally not afraid to outlast them, the skinny man said with a smile. Of course, when we choke off their food supply chain, they'll have an even harder time, the manager said proudly. Boss, that person over there came out to make trouble and lured all the customers to the Kasha Hot Pot Restaurant. The waiter at the door whispered angrily when he saw Raina coming out of the restaurant. Rena had come out to take a look because the number of customers had suddenly decreased. When she heard that, she followed the waiter's gaze and saw the fat and thin men standing next to the uncle across the street. She frowned and asked, what did they say? They told the customers who were about to enter that Kasha Hot Pot Restaurant is having a promotion today. Buy one, get one free of charge for all the dishes. Moreover, all the drinks are free. Their prices are even half of ours. They even said that the hot pot is the same. Of course, they would want to eat the more cost-effective one. Thus, they tricked the customers away, the waiter said angrily. Buy one, get one free for all the dishes, and all the drinks are free. This kind of activity is already close to making a loss. This Kasha Hot Pot is not here with good intentions. Raina thought to herself. This hot pot restaurant was considered one of the bigger ones in the Aiden Square. It was located not far from their dormitory, and she could see it every day when she went to work. The price of this hot pot restaurant was slightly higher than the average hot pot restaurant, but it was still much cheaper than Mamie's. With its classy renovation style and passable taste, its business was quite good. Raina had personally gone to all the hot pot restaurants in the Aiden Square some time ago. Kasha Hot Pot's hot pot base was not considered authentic. It was far from a standard of Mamie's spicy hot pot. However, compared to the average hot pot restaurant that copied the original hot pot, Kasha Hot Pot at least had a spicy taste. The ratio of spices was also reasonable. It was a hot pot restaurant that could be eaten occasionally. For people who had never eaten Mamie's hot pot, it should be quite good. However, she had never seen them do any promotional activities on a normal day. She did not expect them to organize such a big promotion on Mana Hot Pot's opening day. It was obvious that they wanted to attack Mana Hot Pot. For a newly opened restaurant, it was very important to build a reputation in the early stages. A lively atmosphere could quickly build up popularity and reputation. Otherwise, for such a large-scale restaurant, just the daily expenses alone would be a huge sum of money. Normal people would not be able to afford it. The other party's strategy of sacrificing 800 to kill 1,000 enemies was most likely to use their strong capital to exhaust Mana Hot Pot. "Boss, is our opening promotion too weak?" the waiter asked softly. It would be terrible if all the customers were snatched away. No matter how strong the promotion is, it can only attract customers for a while. If we can't guarantee the quality of the dishes, it will narrow our path and cause us to lose more customers. Raina shook her head with a faint, confident smile on her face. She looked at the two men who were peeking at her from afar and said, "As long as we stick to our principles and do a good job of quality control, our reputation and popularity will only increase. It won't depend on this temporary competition." The waitress looked at Rena, and her eyes gradually lit up. She could still remember the hard work that the boss and everyone had put in during this period of time. Mana's hot pot was worthy of the price, and she was confident that the customers would stay after eating it. This should be the place, right? Mana Hot Pot, Mamie's. Mr. Mack is really bad at naming. George laughed as he got out of the carriage with his baby daughter in his arms. He looked at the restaurant's name hanging on the signboard. "I think it sounds pretty good," Palmer said as he got out of the carriage. Big sister, I want Big Sister Amy." Palmer wobbled out and grabbed Palmer's clothes. "But she doesn't want you," Palmer said helplessly as he held Palmer's little hand. "I think it sounds pretty good too." "Mr. Mack is a talented person," Miranda said with a smile as she walked out with Angus, who was still sucking on a pacifier in his mouth. Trojan horse. Christy, who was in George's arms, pouted her little mouth and made a sound in the direction of the hot pot restaurant. All right. If you say it's nice, then it's really nice. Your Uncle Harrison must have arrived a long time ago. Let's go in, too." George smiled as he kissed Christy's cheek. He got out of the carriage and walked toward the entrance of the restaurant. "Another big business. Watch me." Manager Isaac tidied his clothes and walked towards George's family. He stopped in front of them with a smile and said, "Sir, are you bringing your family to eat hot pot together?" "Yes, are you a waiter?" George stopped in his tracks and sized up the rather enthusiastic fat man in front of him. Although he was still a little lacking compared to himself, the quality of the waiter in this branch of Mr. Max had dropped a little. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1673. Isaac's expression froze. He shook his head with a smile and said, "Of course I'm not a waiter in this hot pot restaurant. That's great. Seems like Mr. Mack didn't disappoint me." George nodded. His gaze had already gone past Isaac and landed on the two elven ladies in red uniforms standing at the entrance of the hot pot restaurant. Their noble and elegant temperament and elegant and calm smiles were a familiar feeling. "Please make way. We are going to eat." George retracted his gaze and saw that Isaac was still standing in front of him. He frowned as he didn't want to listen to any pre-meal advertisement. At this time, a small group of customers gathered in front of the hot pot restaurant. After all, this was a new restaurant. It was always a little difficult to decide whether to go in and try it or not. Moreover, it was such a luxuriously decorated restaurant. Looking at it, they felt that the price was not cheap. Isaac didn't expect George to be so impatient, but he didn't show any anger. Instead, he smiled and said, "Don't worry, sir. I'm not a bad person. I'm just an ordinary customer. I just heard that the Kasha Hot Pot restaurant in front. All right, you don't have to say any more. I'm here to eat Mana Hot Pot restaurant. It's Mr. Mack's branch. Those who know what it means to have a golden reputation and guaranteed quality are naturally understood." George interrupted Isaac again. "This is indeed an advertisement, and this method is simply to snatch business." He didn't expect that someone would dare to do this in Mr. Mack's territory. The waitresses are all very pretty. Randy had just alighted from the horse-drawn carriage and continued with a smile. Expert. George gave Randy a thumbs up. "You flatter me." Randy cupped his hands together and walked past Isaac into the hot pot restaurant. Isaac was a little embarrassed as his tower was destroyed one after another. It was his first time meeting such a difficult customer. George was about to walk past Isaac with Chris in his arms, but he stopped when he reached him. He turned around to look at Miranda and the rest and said, "Come, you guys walk in front." Miranda glanced at Isaac, carried Angus, and led Palmer and Parber to the entrance of the restaurant. When the other customers who were still hesitating heard this, their interest was piqued. Who didn't know Amy's name? They were all prepared to go in and have a taste. Even if they didn't want to eat, they could at least take a look. I'm just a warm-hearted person. I'm afraid that you guys don't know that the Kasha Hot Pot restaurant in front is holding a huge event today. The hot pot soup base is free, the dishes are buy one get one free, and all the fine wine is free to drink. The average cost per person is less than 50 copper coins. If you miss out on this, you'll... George looked at him with a mocking expression and said, "Tell me, where did you get the money from? Let's get rich together." Isaac choked on the lines that he had thought of and swallowed them back after a while. He smiled awkwardly and said, "What are you talking about? I don't understand." "Bro, we can only do this at noon." George patted Isaac's shoulder and walked straight to the hot pot restaurant. "Why?" Isaac asked as he looked at George's back. "Something will happen sooner or later," George said without looking back. Isaac's expression changed, and he felt a hint of uneasiness in his heart. Meanwhile, a few customers followed George and his family into the hot pot restaurant. This hot pot restaurant is a little too big. Just the lobby on the first floor alone is comparable to a few Mamie's, and there's even a second floor. Randy couldn't help but sigh when he saw the spacious lobby after entering the hot pot restaurant. In Chaos City, only Dukas Restaurant could compare to a restaurant of this scale. However, the service staff are all elven ladies, and all of them have fair skin, beautiful features, and long legs. Mr. Mac is indeed Mr. Mac. Just this generosity alone is not something that ordinary restaurants can compare to. Randy looked around the lobby, and his gaze was attracted by those elven ladies in red and black uniforms. "Sir, are you alone, or do you have companions?" a service staff asked with a smile. Randy looked around and pondered for a while before saying, Can I share a table?" "Sir, there are still many empty seats in the restaurant. You can choose any seat you like. You don't have to share a table," the service staff replied with a smile. "Eating hot pot alone isn't a little too sad?" Randy sighed softly. He had been sharing a table with Abraham recently, but Mamie's was closed today. He heard that Mr. Mac had opened a new hot pot restaurant at the last minute, so he specially came over to try it and see if he could use it as a new source of inspiration. However, he forgot about the awkwardness of eating hot pot alone. Even if it was a 9-square grid for each person, it would be lively, and he could even make some new friends. Those who ate hot pot were all talents, and they had nice words to say. "Brother, we're all alone, so let's share a table. We're all Mamie's regulars, and we often see you." A voice sounded behind Randy. Randy turned around and saw a tall and thin man with a slightly pale face. His eyes lit up, and he said, "It's you, Mr. Kidney Deficiency. I'm Vicenio." Vicenio glanced at the elf who was covering her mouth and giggling at the side. His face was a little dark. Even if he looked a little weak, he shouldn't call him that in public. "Hello, I'm Randy." Randy smiled and introduced himself. He was quite familiar with this person. He often saw him come with a young woman with a hot figure, and he seemed to like eating Ruggiamo. However, he was alone today. Of course, the main reason was that he looked like he had been squeezed dry every time. It really left a deep impression, although they hadn't spoken to each other before. Since they were both regulars of Mamie Restaurant, they could be considered as half acquaintances. It was much better than eating hot pot alone. The two of them hit it off immediately and found a corner to sit down. Once they sat down, Randy couldn't wait to pick up the menu on the table. As soon as he flipped it open, his eyes lit up, and he said in surprise, "So cheap." On the top left corner of the menu were 3 soup pots to choose from: spicy soup pot, mushroom soup pot, and mandarin duck soup pot. The price was 30 copper coins each. The same hot pot soup base cost 200 copper coins each at Mamie's. However, the bone broth was really delicious and fragrant. He could drink 3 bowls of it just by drinking the broth. Looking further down, pig's brain was only 25 copper coins. Beef was only 35 copper coins each. Duck intestines were only 25 copper coins each. This price was almost 10 times lower than Mamie's. What's going on? Mr. Mac is so ruthless that he's even snatching his own business? Randy muttered. This price was basically pulling a high-cost meal like hot pot to the level of affordable consumption. Even ordinary office workers would be able to choose it as one of the options at their monthly gatherings. Randy lifted his leg and looked at Vicenio as he said, "Then let's order the spicy soup pod, and then order our own dishes?" "That's good." Vicenio nodded in agreement. The two of them quickly ordered their dishes. While waiting for the dishes to be served, they also began to chat. "Why didn't your wife come with you today?" Randy asked with a smile. He had a deep impression of that enchanting young woman. She was 35 or 36 years old, the age where she was like a wolf. She looked like a wild wolf. No wonder Vicenio's body couldn't take it. She went to collect rent today, so she didn't have time to come. Vicenio shook his head. He looked at Randy and hesitated for a while before asking, "Brother, let me ask you something. Every time my wife sleeps, she sticks to me like an octopus. Is there any way to stop her from sticking to me?" Randy looked at Vicenio and earnestly said, "When I was in school, the teacher always made me clean the blackboard. Actually, it wasn't that the blackboard was dirty, but that I didn't hand in my homework." Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1674. Vicenio frowned and pondered for a while. He suddenly realized something and bitterly said, "There's too much homework, and I can't finish it no matter what. This is not something that ordinary people can handle. This is how the world works. Those who suffer from drought die from drought, and those who suffer from drought die from drought." Randy patted Vicenio's shoulder and comforted him. "Brother, you still have to take care of your body. Otherwise, there will really be someone to carry your burden for you one day." Vicenio's expression changed slightly. He opened the menu and ordered 2 more pig's brains. "This thing can make up for that?" Randy asked in surprise. "No, I just want to calm down." Vicenio shook his head. Randy silently gave him a thumbs up. George and his family also entered the hot pot restaurant and went straight to Harrison's table. However, halfway there, George saw Meg and the others sitting not far away. He turned a corner and came to Meg's table. He smiled and said, "Mr. Mack, you're all here for hot pot today." "Yes, we're here to support on the opening day." Meg nodded with a smile. Little sister Chris. Amy had already jumped up from her chair. She raised her little hand to George and said, "Can you let me hug her? Big sister Amy, hug, hug." Parber let go of Palmer's hand and wobbled over to Amy with a happy smile on his little face. "Stop." Amy reached out and pressed her hand against Parber's forehead. She looked at him, who had opened his arms, and shook her head. "I refuse." Parber's smile froze instantly. His mouth moved, and he turned to Palmer and cried in his arms. As he cried, he said, "Big brother, big sister Amy won't hug me again. I want to be a little sister. I want to be a little sister." Palmer helplessly patted his poor little brother's back. "Here for you." George carefully handed Chris to Amy, and only retracted his hand after she hugged her firmly. "Yeah." Chris immediately smiled happily when she was hugged by Amy. She even let out a soft and cute sound. Her 2 bright eyes stared at Amy, and she was overjoyed. Miranda smiled and stroked Parber's head. She looked at Amy and said, "Chris doesn't want her brothers to carry her. It seems like she likes big sister Amy the most. Yeah, she's not even that happy to see me." George was a little jealous. "It's probably because good-looking people like good-looking people," Amy said with a smile. She kissed Chris on the cheek, making the little girl squeak and laugh happily. "The little guy is getting cuter and cuter." Meg looked at Chris, who was in Amy's arms. The little girl was fair and tender, and her light blonde hair was slightly curly. It was as if she was wearing a wig, and she looked extremely adorable. As regular customers of Amy's, everyone was quite familiar with George and his family. Mia couldn't help but get up to play with Chris for a while Gina used a colorful bubble to easily cheer up the crying Parber again. George walked to Meg's side and lowered his voice as he said, "Mr. Mack, I have something to tell you. When I entered just now, I met a guy who was blocking customers at the entrance of the restaurant. He directly promoted Kasha Hot Pot Restaurant's promotion, saying something like buy one, get one free and free drinks. I saw that many interested customers were deceived by him. I know you definitely wouldn't care about such low-level competition tactics, so I just wanted to inform you. There's such a thing? Meg frowned. No wonder there was a sharp decrease in the number of people entering the restaurant just now. It turned out that there was someone outside who intercepted them. Perhaps it was because Amy's rose too quickly, and they soon entered the stage where they didn't need to worry about customers. Therefore, Meg had almost never experienced any business competition. Even if there were a few foolish people who came to challenge him, they would just foolishly charge at him and be killed by him. This was the first time he had seen someone who directly stood at the entrance and intercepted them. Then you guys take your time eating. We'll go over first. George took Chris back from Amy's arms and led the family to Harrison's table. Yeah, Chris raised her little paws and waved at Amy as if she was saying goodbye. Little sister Chris is so cute. I like her so much. Amy sat down again, looked at Meg, and said, Father, when can I have a little sister of my own? All the girls at the table looked at Meg. If Amy wanted a little sister, then she had to have a mother first. You will have a little sister. Come, this duck intestine is going to be overcooked if you don't eat it. Meg calmly put the duck intestine that he had just cooked into Amy's bowl. Wow! As expected, Amy's attention was immediately attracted by the duck intestine in her bowl. She started chewing on the crispy duck intestine. Was this something he could decide? It would depend on when Irina wanted to have a second child. As for the guy who intercepted the customers outside, Meg thought for a while and decided to ignore him for now. He had previously agreed with Raina that he would not interfere with a new hot pot restaurant and would be a quiet investor. Although the other party was not very ethical, they were still competing within the framework of the law. He could not let Amy go out and burn him with a fireball. This kind of thing would definitely happen in the future. He believed that Raina would be able to solve it with her ability. However, looking at the number of new customers in his mind, which was less than 200, he had the urge to go out and kill that guy. If he did not complete the mission, not only would he lose the mutton soup, but he would also have to go to the extreme cold of the Northwest to pick up sheep dung for 3 months. To hell with picking up sheep dung. I think this hot pot is delicious too. Although the base of the pot is a little different, it gives off a different kind of spicy feeling. The soup in the mushroom soup is also very fresh. It has more flavor than the bone broth. Raina is really amazing. Phyllis's forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat as she ate. Yeah, the duck intestine is super fresh. It's crispy and tender. It's delicious. Mia nodded in agreement. I love this spicy beef. It's so delicious. It's spicy, tender, and juicy. It's a new dish that even Mamie's doesn't have. Barbara said in surprise. To be able to control the cost of the ingredients to such a low level and at the same time ensure the quality of the ingredients, it's really amazing. Meg nodded in agreement. Raina did not have a system that could provide the best ingredients. Choosing the best ingredients from the best suppliers and buying the best ingredients from them was not easy. Although the quality of the ingredients was not as good as Mamie's, to be able to gain the approval of Mia and the others was enough to prove Raina's seriousness and excellence. A hot pot of this quality that cost 100 copper coins per person was enough to be called a businessman with a conscience. As for Kasha Hot Pot, they had already lost from a moment they started the buy one get one free campaign. Cheap prices could not keep customers. Quality was the only way to survive in the food and beverage industry. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1675. Isaac looked proudly at the group of customers who had successfully given up on trying Mana Hot Pot under his guidance and headed to Kasha. Although they had failed a few times, more customers still chose Kasha, which was more active and had been open for a longer time. This Mana Hot Pot restaurant seems to be blocked by me alone. It's too weak. Isaac smiled proudly. He was a little worried that the other party would send someone to mess with him. However, when he saw the 2 elven ladies standing at the door and looking at him with their big watery eyes, he realized that they couldn't even scold him. Obviously, his worry was unnecessary. Of course, if the other party really dared to make a move, he would dare to lie in front of the door today. Anyway, it was the first day of opening, so he definitely wouldn't let the other party have a good time. Boss, that restaurant in front seems to be Mr. Mac's new hot pot restaurant, but they don't seem to have set up a table outside. Do we bring the chairs for nothing? Keel asked Sardras as he carried the iron chair on his shoulder. I heard from them that the hot pot is very spicy, and we will catch fire once we eat it. We can't make things difficult for Mr. Mac, Sardras muttered. Keel and the others have been talking about eating hot pot for a while, but Mamie's hot pot was really too expensive. One meal was worth a few Rugiamos, so they couldn't bear to part with it. Sardras only brought the founding team of the Burning Legion to try out the new hot pot restaurant last night, when he heard from Mr. Mac that the food was cheap. Then what should we do? Our Burning Legion will catch fire sooner or later. We can't eat in the restaurant. Mon scratched his head anxiously. Let's go to the restaurant and ask if they can set up a table outside for us. If they can't, then we won't eat it, Sardras said. A row of 6 lava demons, either carrying or carrying iron chairs, walked towards the hot pot restaurant in an imposing manner. It was quite eye-catching. Manager, this is big business. The skinny man nudged Isaac. Isaac turned around and saw the 6 lava demons walking over aggressively. He swallowed his saliva subconsciously. These demons looked too scary. However, based on his experience, these demons' appetite was at least 3 to 4 times that of a normal person. The 6 of them could finish a dish for 20 people. It was indeed a big business. Watch me. Isaac tidied his clothes and put on a smile as he walked quickly towards the lava demons. Bam! Isaac had just steadied himself, and before he could say anything, he was sent flying by Sardras, who was walking over quickly. Sardras's footsteps stopped, and he looked around in confusion. He seemed to have knocked something just now. The other demons also stopped and looked at Sardras. Boss, over there, Keel said as he pointed at Isaac, who had been sent flying 2 meters away. Sardras and the other demons looked down at Isaac at the same time, and only then did they see this fat and short man. Why did you bump into me? Sardras asked Isaac, who was rubbing his butt and getting up. I knocked you down. Isaac felt as if he had been knocked by a wild bull. He didn't even have the chance to reason with the other party, and the other party had already accused him. How despicable. However, when he raised his head, he saw 5 ferocious faces looking down at him. Complicated and terrifying lava patterns were carved on their faces, and their bell-sized eyes were glaring at him as if they would tear him apart the next moment. The fear that arose made his legs tremble. Although this was Chaos City, he didn't feel the sense of security brought by the law. Any demon could twist his head off easily. Our big brother is asking you a question, Mon said arrogantly. The other demons also widened their eyes in shock. Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. Isaac quickly apologized. He felt so wronged. What kind of world was this? I'll let it go this time. Watch where you're going next time. Sardras retracted his gaze and prepared to continue walking towards the hot pot restaurant. Be careful next time. All the demons reminded him carefully. Yes, yes, yes. Isaac nodded rapidly. He was caught off guard by the big boss's sudden concern. However, seeing that Sardras was about to walk past him to man a hot pot restaurant, he clenched his teeth and said, I'm very sorry for offending you, my lord. As an apology, I would like to recommend a hot pot restaurant to you. It's half the price of this hot pot restaurant. Also, the dishes are buy one, get one free, and the drinks are free. It's right in front. It's called Kasha Hot Pot Restaurant. Sardras stopped in his tracks. He looked down at Isaac and asked, Is that hot pot restaurant open by Mr. Mac as well? Isaac was so frightened by Sardra's aura that he took 2 steps back. He shook his head and said, And no. Sardras frowned. He raised his voice and said, Then did I ask you? You just nagged me to recommend a lousy restaurant? Do you think I'm gullible? Do you think our boss is gullible? Keel, Mond, and the others formed a circle and looked down at Isaac. How could that be? Isaac looked up at that ferocious face. He was about to cry. Why were these demons so unreasonable? You bumped into our boss first, and then you cheated us maliciously. Are you looking down on the Burning Legion? Keel kicked Isaac's knee. Isaac's legs gave way, and he knelt on the ground. Everyone from the Burning Legion kicked him. In the end, Mond grabbed him by the collar and threw him to the side. Everyone clapped their hands and followed Sardras to the hot pot restaurant. The two elves standing at the entrance of the hot pot restaurant were a little nervous and surprised at first. However, when they saw Isaac, who was beaten black and blue, being thrown out, they felt relieved. After being disgusted for the entire afternoon, they finally felt better. They even felt that the few ferocious-looking demons were much more amiable. Sardras stood at the entrance of the hot pot restaurant. He rubbed his hands together and forced a smile on his face. He looked at that elf and said in a gentle voice, "Miss, I would like to ask if you can eat outdoor hot pot outside the restaurant?" That elf looked at Sardras, who was smiling honestly. She didn't know where the domineering aura that she had when she beat up Isaac had disappeared. She was stunned for a moment before she recovered. She shook her head and said, "I'm sorry, sir. We only have seats in the restaurant. We don't have outdoor seats. There are still many empty seats in the restaurant. Thank you, but we might catch fire if we eat hot pot. We can only eat outdoors." Sardras was a little disappointed when he heard that. He turned around to look at the demons and said, "Seems like we can't eat today." That elf looked at Sardras and the others, touched. She didn't expect them to be so considerate demons. She hesitated for a moment and said, "Please wait a moment. I can ask the boss." No pop-up window. Chapter 1676. Outdoor Seating? Reyna was a little surprised to see Sardras and the others standing at the entrance of the restaurant. She had already heard from the waiter how they beat up that hateful guy who intercepted their customers. She recognized Sardras and the others. They were Mamie Restaurant's regulars. Every time they came, they would buy a lot of Ruggiamos. Although they looked a little fierce, they were actually very polite. They would even lower their voices when they spoke. "Yes, but we don't have outdoor seating." The waiter nodded, a little hesitant. Reyna smiled and said, "They helped us solve a problem, so it's not difficult to arrange an outdoor seating. According to the Aiden Square shop rules, the restaurant is allowed to have outdoor seating 3 meters in front of the restaurant. Arrange a spare hot pot table at the entrance." Okay. The waiter's eyes lit up, and he walked briskly to the warehouse. Soon, he carried a round hot pot table out of the door. "Our boss said he can set up an outdoor table for you," the waiter said to Sardras and the others as he put down the round table gently on the right side of the door. "Thank you, miss," Sardras said with a smile. The lava demons also smiled at the waiter and sat down around the table with their folding chairs. "You're welcome. A waiter in charge of reception will come to take your order soon," the waiter said with a blush. She had heard many terrifying rumors about demons in the Wind Forest, but only after coming to Chaos City did she discover that the demons here weren't as terrifying as she had imagined. In fact, they were even a little adorable. "Speaking of which, this is the first time we are sitting down to eat at Mamie's," Keel said with an excited chuckle. "Yes, we were too embarrassed to sit there before. It's indeed more convenient to bring our own chairs," Mon said with a silly smile. "This is Mana Hot Pot Restaurant, not Mamie's," Mazak corrected seriously. "Anyway, they're all opened by Mr. Mac. Mamie's and Mana Hot Pot Restaurant are the same," Karzak mumbled. "All right, quiet down. Don't disturb Mr. Mac's business," Sardras said with a dry cough. Sardras coughed dryly. They had obviously received special treatment, as an extra table was specially added for them. "Give them a 50% discount when it's time to settle the bill," Reyna whispered to the waiter who was about to take their order. "All right," the waitress nodded. She had already heard that the demons outside had helped to beat up that disgusting guy and had a good impression of them. "This is the menu. Please order." The waiter walked to the table at the entrance and placed the menu in front of Sardras. He smiled and said, "The hot pot soup base is a must-have. You can choose any other dishes." "All right, let's take a look first." Sardras nodded and flipped open the menu. Compared to Mamie's menu, which cost hundreds and thousands of copper coins, this menu was indeed much gentler to the wallet. The most expensive mala spicy beef only cost 45 copper coins per serving, and it weighed half a caddy. As for some vegetables such as lotus root and potatoes, they were all priced below 10 copper coins. Sardras turned the menu to everyone and said generously, "Come, open it up. It's my treat today. Hee hee, this pig's brain looks good. I want 10 of it," Mon said with a silly smile. Casas pointed at the mala spicy beef and said, "This beef looks good. I want 10 servings. I heard them say that duck intestines are delicious. I want 10 servings of duck intestines, too," Keel said without hesitation. The waitress at the side was a little surprised. There are actually people who order like that. Each person ordered 1 dish and 10 servings at that. Is there anyone who orders like you? There's no skill involved at all. Sargeras took back the menu with disdain. He then smiled at the waitress and said, "We want a mala spicy soup base and 10 servings of each of the meat on the menu." The waitress was stunned, but her good training allowed her to control her expression quickly. She kept the menu and nodded with a smile. "All right, please wait a moment." The skinny man dragged Isaac to the side and looked at the manager who was beaten into a pig's head. He asked carefully, "Manager, are you all right?" "Ugh, Tui." Isaac spat out half of his broken tooth. He squinted his swollen eyes and wailed, "I was almost beaten to death. I saw it. You fought a group of demons alone. You were so generous and brave. My blood boiled when I saw it," the skinny man said with admiration. Isaac glanced at that man from the side. The man also realized that his acting was a little exaggerated. He immediately changed the topic and said, "Look, manager, those fellows who beat you up have already sat down at the entrance. They actually didn't enter. Could it be that this hot pot restaurant doesn't allow demons to enter?" Upon hearing that, Isaac turned his head with difficulty to look in the direction of the hot pot restaurant's entrance. The moment he saw that group of demons, he felt his blood pressure rise crazily, and the injuries on his body became more painful. However, these guys were actually sitting at the entrance. He originally thought that they were hired thugs from the hot pot restaurant, but now it didn't seem like it. They couldn't even enter the hot pot restaurant. They just sat at the entrance in a somewhat shabby manner. They even brought their own chairs. However, they seemed to have already ordered and were waiting for the dishes to be served leisurely. "You actually dare to sit there leisurely and prepare to eat hot pot after beating me up like this?" Isaac was furious. "Manager, what do you think we should do?" The skinny man immediately put on a posture that looked like he was ready to fight to the death. "Help me up." Isaac struggled with a ferocious expression as he was helped up. "You're not really going to do it, are you?" The skinny man swallowed his saliva. Isaac looked at those burly lava demons and actually became much weaker. He pointed at the entrance of the restaurant and said, "I want to lie down there." "Yes, if we can't beat them, let's make a scene and say that they're bullying their customers." The skinny man understood tacitly. Now that the hot pot restaurant's entrance was gradually becoming more crowded, they couldn't just let them go in like that. He helped Isaac walk towards the entrance of the hot pot restaurant. "You're here again?" Sargeras raised his head and happened to see Isaac walking over. He frowned. Mon stood up, glared at Isaac, and said, "You're here again, and you even found a helper. Are you trying to bully us with fewer people?" All the lava demons stood up one by one and looked at the two of them with their piercing, cold gazes. There seemed to be flames dancing in their eyes, and they were about to burst out at any time. Isaac and the skinny man stopped in their tracks. Their faces turned pale instantly, and their legs started to tremble uncontrollably. These demons were completely unreasonable. We're just passing by. Please enjoy your food and drinks, sirs." Isaac put on a smile that was uglier than crying as he limped back silently with the skinny man who was almost frozen stiff. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1677. Isaac felt that he was too lowly. He was so lowly that he didn't even have the courage to lie on the ground and ask for compensation. But what could he do? The other party was really ruthless. Their punches and kicks were not a joke at all. He had no doubt that his life would be over if he dared to walk over and lie on the ground. A wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. He knew that. "Supervisor, they outnumber us. Although we lost honorably, what should we do now? Go back to get reinforcements?" The skinny man asked in a trembling voice as he came back to his senses and supported Isaac. "Not yet. Let's observe the situation first." Isaac shook his head and glanced at Sargeras and the rest from the corner of his eyes. He sneered and said, "This boss is also a hothead. He thought that placing these ferocious demons at the door would be foolproof. Little did he know that by stopping us, he was also stopping the customers who wanted to enter the restaurant. If there was a table of such terrifying demons sitting in front of any restaurant, the customers passing by would be scared, let alone be interested in the restaurant. Brilliant idea, supervisor. The skinny man's eyes lit up. He helped Isaac sit down on the chair and looked at him with admiration. Then, did you lose to them on purpose just now to lower their guard? Air. Of course, this matter couldn't escape my calculations. Isaac pulled the wound on his buttocks as he sat down. He couldn't help but grimace as he looked in the direction of Mana Hot Pot Restaurant's entrance with a cold smile. A group of ferocious-looking lava demons sitting at the door was definitely a deterrent to the timid customers. They might even have the urge to take a detour. Not only would they not be able to attract customers, but they would also lose many customers. It gave people a sense of oppression, as if the restaurant was bullying the customers. Mana Hot Pot Restaurant? What is hot pot? Is it a type of dish? Yes, this is the first time I've heard of it. Could be a hot pot, or a special kind of grilled meat. I saw a few restaurants with hot pot on the way here just now. It might be a delicacy that has become popular recently. Most of the passers-by would stop and take a few glances at the splendidly decorated Mana Hot Pot Restaurant. Most of the people who came here at this time were here to look for food. Unfortunately, Mamie's was closed today. So many people who wanted to try the food could only return empty-handed. As for hot pot, most people didn't know anything about it. It wasn't a name that had appeared in the food and beverage structure that they were familiar with. It was something that made people scratch their heads. Because of this, very few guests entered directly. Of course, the lava demons sitting at the entrance of the hot pot restaurant were indeed quite eye-catching. They looked like they were there to hold the fort and were not to be trifled with. Just as many customers were hesitating whether to enter or to go to the next restaurant, an elven waiter came out with a steaming bronze cauldron. He went straight to the demon's table and placed the cauldron in the round hole in the middle of the crowd. A hot and spicy aroma exploded like a bomb, instantly spreading in all directions. What is this? What a pungent smell. It smells so good. Wow, this fragrant and spicy smell makes people feel warm. It's really tempting in this cold winter. The aroma spread and immediately attracted the attention of the passers-by. Some customers with sensitive noses couldn't help but sneeze from the sudden spicy smell, while more customers were attracted by the steaming hot pot of soup. The surface of the bright red soup pot was covered with red dried chili. Steam rose, and the fragrant and spicy smell wafted over. Just looking at it made people feel hot in their throats and hot in their bodies. The elven waiter put down the soup pot and twisted a spot on the table a few times. The soup pot on the table actually started to bubble, and soon it started to boil. There's a fire under the pot? Is that why it's called hot pot? Could it be that it's being eaten while being cooked? It seems like these lava demons aren't hired thugs, but customers who are here to eat. The hot and spicy aroma wafting in the air, as well as the steaming soup pot, successfully aroused everyone's interest. They all stopped in their tracks, intending to see what kind of novel way of eating this hot pot was. Some passers-by were also attracted by the aroma and stopped in their tracks. The lava demons sitting in front of the pot were all flushed. This spicy aroma was a little beyond their expectations. Just a whiff of it made their blood flow faster, and they couldn't help but want to burn. "Boss, why do I feel like we should have chosen a clear soup pot?" Keel whispered. Sargeras glared at Keel and sternly said, "This concerns the reputation of the Burning Legion. If word gets out that the Burning Legion is eating a clear soup pot, how are we going to survive in the future?" All the demons nodded solemnly. "Then can we compromise with the Mandarin duck pot?" Mond whispered. "No, the Burning Legion will never compromise." Sargeras shook his head firmly. 4 elven waiters pushed 4 four-level dining carts filled with various types of meat out and stopped beside everyone. One of the waiters smiled and said, "Dear customers, these are the dishes you ordered. As there are a lot of them, they're placed on the 4 dining carts. You can use them when you are cooking. This is a guide to cooking hot pot. It briefly introduces the method and time to cook each ingredient. As long as you follow the guide, you will be able to enjoy the delicious hot pot dishes. I wish you all a pleasant meal. All right, thank you. Sardras accepted the guide with a nod and a smile. Why are they all raw dishes? Is a chef of this restaurant so lazy that he doesn't even cook for the customers? Yeah, this is the first time I've seen a restaurant that serves ingredients to the customers. Isn't this a joke? Do they want the customers to cook for themselves? If we have to cook for ourselves, then why would we come out to eat? The onlookers looked at the plates of ingredients placed on the dining carts and were puzzled. This is the exclusive guide to eating hot pot. Whoever masters it can become the real king of hot pot. Sardras slowly raised the guide in his hand. All the lava demons also looked up slowly and stared at the guide as if they were looking at a treasure. They had been drooling over the hot pot for a long time, and now that they could finally get what they wanted, they gradually became excited. Sardras flipped open the guide and solemnly said, "The first step to eating hot pot is to make a suitable dipping sauce. First, pick up the small bowl beside us and add minced garlic, chopped green onions, coriander, sesame oil according to the weight and preference of each person." All the lava demons picked up their small bowls and added various spices according to Sardra's instructions. Chapter 1678. The way the group of ferocious lava demons were holding small spoons carefully and adding all sorts of spices into the small bowls that were not even the size of their palms made one feel a little cold. However, this also made everyone a little curious. What was this seemingly ritualistic step used for? What was this dipping dish? How exactly was this hot pot eaten? Oh no, they used the aroma of the hot pot base to attract customers, and those demons are really here to eat the hot pot. Isn't this a living advertisement? Isaac slapped his thigh and grimaced in pain as he panicked. This aroma, the skinny man sniffed seriously and revealed an intoxicated expression. However, he quickly said seriously, "It's far inferior to our kasha hot pot." Of course, Isaac's expression twitched a few times, and he blushed as he replied. All the demons prepared the dipping sauce according to their individual tastes. Sardras picked up the guide again and continued to read. "Tripe, pick it up with chopsticks and place it in the boiling hot soup pot. Put it down for 1 second, lift it up for 1 second, and repeat the actions 8 times. Then it can be eaten. Do not exceed the time limit, or you will lose your soul." Tripe? What's that? All the demons' gazes started to search the dining car. "It's this." Sardras took a plate of tripe from the topmost layer of the dining car beside him and placed it on the table. The thin, brownish-black tripe was soaked in the water, and its surface was full of wrinkles. However, it looked like there was quite a lot of it. All the demons took a plate of tripe each and placed it in front of them. We really have to do it ourselves? This is the first time I've seen this way of eating, but it sounds quite interesting. We have a soup pot, and the ingredients are all cut and prepared. We just have to pick it up with chopsticks and dip it in the pot. It's very simple. Can we really eat dishes that we made ourselves? I almost destroyed my own family the last time. All the onlookers were shocked when they heard that, and some of them were rather interested. I heard that tripe is very delicious. Let me try it first. Keel picked up the long chopsticks eagerly and picked up a piece of tripe clumsily. Lava demons ate directly with their hands. It was too difficult for them to use chopsticks. The tripe was placed in the boiling hot pot, and the red soup surged. When Keel picked up the chopsticks again, the tripe was already gone. Oh! Keel was stunned and hurriedly scooped up the tripe with his chopsticks. The pepper and chili were rolling in the red soup, and the tripe was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no trace of the tripe. There's no need to fish it out. What's the point of having a tripe that has lost its soul? Mon patted Keel's shoulder and comforted him. Then he picked up his chopsticks and picked up a piece of tripe. He smiled and said, "I've been practicing using chopsticks recently." Mon's tripe rose and fell 4 times in the red soup, but after the 5th time, it could not be picked up again. "Hot pot is indeed not simple," Mon said dejectedly as he looked at the empty chopsticks. Cassis, Marxa, and the others also tried to pick up the tripe, but they all ended up feeding it to the hot pot. They didn't even get a single strand of hair back. Seems like you all don't have the fortune to eat tripe. Sargeras sat upright and picked up a piece of tripe with his chopsticks solemnly. Every movement was slow and precise like a robot. The thin piece of tripe floated up and down in the red soup like a small boat struggling to survive in a stormy sea. After going up and down 8 times, it finally escaped the sea of fire and dived into the dipping dish to swim. Then it was fed into a big mouth that had been waiting for a long time. The crisp and chewy tripe made a crisp sound as it clashed with the teeth. It was like a beautiful melody, and one could imagine that chewy feeling. Sargeras had already closed his eyes. The tripe that was soaked in red oil and soup and wrapped in a layer of dipping sauce. The spiciness and fresh fragrance blossomed on the tip of his tongue, and the chewy and crisp texture brought about the most wonderful feedback. What an enchanting taste. What a wonderful texture. He almost didn't know how to describe this wonderful enjoyment. A blissful smile appeared on that dignified face. A warm current flowed from the tip of his tongue and quickly spread to his limbs and bones. Huff! A ball of flame rose from the top of his head. The magma patterns on the surface of his body turned red, and the fiery red magma flowed slowly in those patterns. Only his hands were still normal, but he didn't realize it. Gulp! The sound of saliva being swallowed could be heard around him. There was no need for too much explanation. Sarger's expression and actions were already better than any words. They seemed to have also felt the deliciousness and freshness of the tripe. With a mouthful of the spicy hot pot aroma, they even felt their throats burning. I actually want to eat when I see a demon eating. A young lady pinched her thigh, trying to prove if she had been bewitched by some illusion. Yes, it hurts. She sucked in a breath of cold air to confirm that she really wanted to eat it and wasn't bewitched. Mr. Mac didn't lie to me. This tripe is indeed delicious, Sargeras said with a smile as he opened his eyes. Sargeras smiled as he opened his eyes. He picked up a piece of tripe from the bowl and placed it in the pot to cook. Again, Keel and the rest also began their second and third attempts. After a few failures, Keel finally got the tripe that he had failed in the first few rounds in the pot. Although the texture was a little overcooked and less crispy after it was soaked in the red soup, the spiciness was even better, and he was lit on fire on the spot. Huff, huff, huff. The lava demons were like human-shaped torches that were lit up one after another. They ate happily, and it felt like they were eating in a sauna room, even though water was splashed and turned into ice outside. Even the surrounding customers felt a lot warmer. They looked at the group of burly lava demons clumsily holding long chopsticks, picking up all kinds of ingredients, and dipping them into the red soup pot with curiosity. However, it was such a strange and somewhat funny scene that made the surrounding people swallow their saliva. Sargeras picked up the guide again and read, "I beef, fat and lean, shaped like an eye, hence the name. It's as thin as paper, and as long as it's cooked in a hot pot for a while, it can be scooped out immediately." As soon as he finished speaking, the demons had already placed 10 servings of fat beef on the table. This is easy. Keel picked up a piece of fresh fat beef that was as thin as paper and put it into the boiling soup pot. The bright red color quickly turned white, and then it was covered with a layer of beautiful red. He lifted it out of the pot, rolled the steaming fat beef in the dipping sauce, and covered it with sesame oil and sauce before putting it into his mouth. The fat beef had already absorbed the taste of the thick soup perfectly, and that tender and delicate texture was mesmerizing. It was tender and soft, and as fine as silk. After chewing it carefully, the fragrance of the meat quickly filled his entire mouth, making him unable to stop himself. Amazing! Keel opened his eyes after a long time and said with an intoxicated expression, "All right, I've decided to eat here for lunch. I want to eat meat." The young lady pulled her best friend toward the door and didn't forget to wipe the saliva at the corner of her mouth. This way of eating is too cruel. I can't help but tear up. Let's not look anymore. We'll eat here. A long-haired uncle pulled his best friend toward the restaurant. The customers who were attracted by the aroma couldn't help but step in after seeing the scene of Sardra's and the others eating the hot pot, causing a small climax. Chapter 1679. Meg looked at the rapidly increasing number of people entering the restaurant in his mind and looked toward the door in surprise. Previously, there were almost no new customers entering the restaurant. Unexpectedly, there was a small explosion. Groups of customers entered the restaurant and sat down under the guidance of the waiters, making the restaurant lively all of a sudden. The number of people entering the restaurant exceeded 300 in a short while, and it was still rising. What happened outside? So many people suddenly came in. Mia turned to look in the direction of the door with surprise and asked Rena, who happened to wander near them. Rena was also a little surprised by the sudden increase in customers. After thinking for a while, she said with uncertainty, "Those customers who often come to the restaurant and buy a lot of Reggiamos wanted to eat the hot pot outdoors, so I asked them to arrange a table for them. They should have started eating now." "I see. Those customers must have seen the Burning Legion eating the hot pot, so they couldn't help but come in to eat the hot pot." Mia was deep in thought. She looked at Meg with a smile and said, "Boss often asks Meg to do this kind of thing, and it works every time. For the hot pot that most customers don't know about, this is indeed a good idea." Meg nodded with a smile. Rena also let the Burning Legion advertise for Mana Hot Pot by chance, and the effect was excellent. Moreover, it was equivalent to screening the customers. The customers who entered the restaurant had a strong purpose, so the ordering rate was naturally high. "Then I should thank them properly," Rena said with a smile. The customers walked into the hot pot restaurant, and their eyes lit up when they saw the hall. Bright lights illuminated the hall. It was decorated in a splendid style with fresh green decorations. Nearly 100 tables were displayed, and there were simple partitions between them. However, it didn't affect the permeability of the space at all. The restaurant was very warm, and the air was filled with the rich aroma of the hot pot. There were already more than 20 tables with customers. White steam rose from the hot pot, and the customers chatted as they ate the hot pot. While waiting for the delicacies to be cooked, the chatting became relaxed and joyful. Such an environment made people feel relaxed very quickly. Under the guidance of the beautiful and generous elven waitress, they could take a seat at their favorite table and then start ordering. To the surprise of most of the customers, the prices of the dishes in this luxurious restaurant were even lower than those in many of the restaurants in the Aiden Square. Thus, they all began to place their orders. An endless stream of customers entered the restaurant, creating a very good driving effect. The members of the Burning Legion sitting at the entrance not only successfully deterred Isaac, who wanted to intercept the customers, but also completed the mission of clearing the minds for the other customers. They only needed to stand to the side and watch for a while, and most people couldn't help but walk into the hot pot restaurant. "Let go of that duck intestine. I dropped it 3 rounds ago. Then I'll really let him go? No, put it in my bowl. If you put it down, I might not be able to find it again even if I wait another 3 rounds. The members of the Burning Legion were completely oblivious to this. They were completely immersed in the joy of hot pot. Everyone was like 6 burning torches, bringing some warmth to the surrounding guests. Of course, this did not exclude the possibility that some people were just here to warm themselves up. Isaac and the skinny man looked at this scene from across the street with melancholy. "Supervisor, what do we do now?" The skinny man asked softly. He wanted to intercept the customers, but he didn't dare to go forward. He couldn't beat them in a fight, and if he was beaten up, he couldn't even walk over and lie on the ground. "I'm too far south," Isaac said with a gloomy face. "With those gatekeepers guarding, no matter who came to Kasha Hot Pot Restaurant today, it would be useless. Didn't you say in the morning that we were going to see what they are selling? Do we still want to go now?" The skinny man continued to ask. His calves were trembling as he looked at the fiery lava demon. "If we go now, wouldn't we be telling them what we want to do?" Isaac rolled his eyes at him. He stood up with the help of the bench and said, "Help me. Let's go back to the restaurant first and ask the boss to send more people over." "All right, take your time." The skinny man was relieved as he helped Isaac, who was limping, walk slowly in the direction of Kasha Hot Pot Restaurant. When Meg and the rest were almost done with their meal, More than half of the seats in the hall on the first floor were already filled. Steam rose up, accompanied by the chatter of the people. It was as hot as the boiling soup in the pot. Seems like I don't need to think of anything else. Meg glanced at the number of people in his mind, which had become 421/1000. It was noon now, and the hot pot restaurant's business was the busiest at night. The customers all looked very satisfied. The unique joy of hot pot, as well as the extreme deliciousness after entering their mouths, brought them a blissful and novel dining experience. The delicacies that were spread by word of mouth could bring about a very high conversion rate of new customers. Meg believed that these 400-odd customers would bring more new customers to the hot pot restaurant in the near future. Through the excellent reputation, there would be a continuous fishing. "Bill, please." Meg raised his hand and gestured to the waiter. "Sir, the boss of your table said that it would be under her name. If you are done with your meal, you can leave directly," the elf waiter said with a smile as he walked up. "It's the first day of business, so it should be as much as it should be. How can it be under the boss's name?" Meg shook his head with a smile. He took out his money bag and said, "Come, how much did our table cost?" "This." The elf waiter looked at Meg with some hesitation. He looked around, trying to find the boss, but the boss seemed to have gone upstairs. "It's a total of 1,250 copper coins. I calculated it." Amy burped. "Keep the change. The extra is a tip." Meg took out a dragon coin and 3 gold coins and handed them to the elf. Then he took Amy's little hand and walked towards the door. The waiter took the money and didn't know whether to return it to Meg or accept it. "Aren't I going to say goodbye to Raina before leaving?" Mia took the clothes and asked Meg. "She'll be very busy today. We don't want to trouble her." Meg shook his head. "Okay." Mia nodded obediently. Everyone left with Meg. Along the way, the regulars of Amy's greeted Meg and the others familiarly. They looked like popular kings. When Meg walked out, a wave of heat hit him, making him a little dazed. Are these weird uncles burning themselves to warm others? Amy looked at the members of the Burning Legion, who were burning themselves very vigorously, and was a little surprised. Air. Meg pondered. If that was the case, it didn't seem to be a problem. However, he was indeed shocked by the Burning Legion's way of eating hot pot. 6 human-shaped pillars of fire surrounded a large pot, and even the iron chair they were sitting on was scorched red. It was very fitting for the name of hot pot. Book guest house reading website. Chapter 1680. "Mr. Mac, did you guys just come out from hot pot?" Sargeras quickly stood up when he saw Meg and the rest. Keel, Mond, and the rest also quickly stood up. Mond didn't forget to swallow the hot beef in his mouth and looked at Meg with respect. "Yes, it's the first day of business, so we came to try it out." Meg nodded with a smile and then quickly waved his hand and said, "You guys continue to eat. Don't mind us." He had to admit that the Burning Legion's hot pot was more eye-catching than he had imagined. The rising flames could be seen from 100 meters away. Those who didn't know would think that there was a bonfire party going on. Moreover, even if they weren't attracted by the hot pot, it didn't affect them from chatting around the fire. It was not easy to find such a large stove with a stable temperature. Their meal brought at least 200 customers to Mana Hot Pot Restaurant. Seeing that the food on the 4 trolleys was almost finished, if he were Raina, he would give them another trolley of food. The effect would be equivalent to a high-level performance team. Amy, on the other hand, had invited her friends over to play in the afternoon, so Mag parted ways with her and Mia at the restaurant's entrance. It was a rare day off, so the ladies were all prepared to go shopping and spend their wages that they had just received this month. Not long after they returned to the restaurant, Daphne and Ignatsu came together, while Jessica was sent over by her mother. After making ice cream for each child, the children went to the playground on the 2nd floor to play. Meg, who was free, also went to the study on the 2nd floor and took a book about the Cthulhu mythos from the bookshelf to read. The plan to explore the Thunderstorm Mountains at night last time was canceled because of the crisis, but they should be going there soon. Those great old ones were too evil, and a statue almost caused him to fall into their trap last time. Therefore, he didn't dare to bring Irina to the sealed land directly. He could only wait for Crassus and Julian to go together. Having two more great magic casters would at least give him more protection. Kasha looked at Isaac, who was being helped into the room, and frowned. How did you end up like this? Isaac smiled awkwardly and said, I got into a conflict with a few of their customers when I was promoting our hot pot restaurant. It's just a small injury, nothing serious. Have you found out everything about Mana Hot Pot Restaurant? How was the business on the first day of opening? Kasha didn't care about Isaac's injury and asked directly. Boss, after those demons injured the manager, they sat at the entrance of the hot pot restaurant and didn't let us get close. The skinny man looked at Kasha and said carefully, I think those guys are hired thugs from Mana Hot Pot. Idiot. I asked you to investigate their background and see what they're selling so that we can cut off their supply channels. Why'd you go and fight? Are you out of your mind? Kasha roared. The skinny man's legs trembled, and he almost knelt down on the spot. Boss, don't be angry. At first, I wanted to attract all their customers to our restaurant. Firstly, it would increase the number of customers for our restaurant. Secondly, I wanted them to have no business on the first day of opening. I didn't expect to meet those bastards. Isaac said fearfully, Get straight to the point. How is the business? Kasha said coldly, Those bastards were eating hot pot at the entrance of the restaurant, and they attracted some customers instead. So far, the business is doing well. However, that hot pot restaurant is indeed related to Mamie's, Isaac said softly. Is it really related to Mamie's? Kasha's face became even uglier. Yes. Isaac nodded carefully. All right, all of you get out. I will make a trip there personally. Kasha took his mink fur coat and walked out of the door with his secretary. Two orcs in combat attire followed closely behind. Kasha's horse-drawn carriage had just left when he lifted the curtain and saw a lively scene not far away. There seemed to be hundreds of people surrounding a bonfire. It was the newly opened Mana Hot Pot restaurant. What's going on? Holding a bonfire party in the middle of the day? And there are so many people watching? Kasha muttered to himself with a frown. Stop. I will walk over. Kasha spoke when they were about 100 meters away. The horse-drawn carriage stopped, and he walked towards Mana Hot Pot restaurant with his blonde secretary. There were hundreds of people gathered at the entrance of the hot pot restaurant, and there were still passers-by coming in an endless stream. There were also many customers entering and exiting the hot pot restaurant. The business was already very good on the first day of the restaurant's opening. Kasha's hot pot restaurant didn't even have such a significant flow of people when it was open for a month. I didn't expect their business to be so good on the first day of their opening. Could it be that they also organized a big opening event? Kasha frowned. This wasn't good news for his hot pot restaurant. As they approached the entrance of the hot pot restaurant, a fragrant and spicy aroma gradually became clear. It was a fragrance that was similar to Mamie's hot pot. Kasha found a business opportunity from Mamie's when he opened a hot pot restaurant. He was late for a friend's banquet and was amazed by the scrumptiousness. At that time, he felt that this place was very promising. However, the price of Mamie's hot pot was very high, and it wasn't something that ordinary people could afford. Furthermore, he had his own channels to get all kinds of meat at low prices. Hence, he immediately bought a big restaurant and got a few old chefs to go to Mamie's every day to study the hot pot base. Finally, he came up with 50% of the taste of Mamie's hot pot and targeted the middle and low spending groups at 100 per person. Just as he had expected, after the initial period of publicity, his hot pot restaurant quickly attracted a period of explosion. Duck intestines, tripe, and other things were not worth much in the market at all. They could bring him hundreds of thousands of yuan in a day. Just as he started to look for new restaurants and was preparing to open 3 new hot pot restaurants in Chaos City, he discovered that a new hot pot restaurant had quietly opened here. Mamie's wasn't on his list of competitors. They were facing customers of a completely different level. Furthermore, his restaurant wasn't big and could only serve a few hundred customers every day. However, this large-scale hot pot restaurant was different. As long as the boss was sane, he wouldn't compete with Mamie's. His direct competitor would be his Kasha hot pot. He heard that Bowen and his son were arrested because of this restaurant, but he didn't manage to find out who was in charge of this restaurant. He didn't expect it to be related to Mamie's. The aroma of the hot pot in the air was indeed 80 to 90% similar to Mamie's hot pot. It was much stronger than Cash's hot pot. It was like a living advertisement in the air. After passing through the crowd, he finally saw what everyone was looking at. It wasn't a bonfire. It was a group of demons eating hot pot. They had successfully acted out what it meant to eat hot pot that would catch fire. They even made this cold winter day feel like it was scorching hot. This is freaking breaking the rules. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1681. Casha was a little shocked by the 6 demons eating heatedly at the entrance. He was even more shocked that these boorish demons could actually make eating hot pots so enjoyable. A fire in winter was a fatal temptation to passers-by. Most of them couldn't resist the temptation of the aroma after watching for a while and wanted to enter the hot pot restaurant to try the taste of the hot pot. The secretary whispered in Casha's ear, "Boss, are they actors?" Whether they are actors or not, it's enough to prove that this boss is not ordinary, Casha said with a grave expression. He retracted his gaze from the demons and turned to walk towards the entrance of the hot pot restaurant. "Welcome. May I ask how many of you are here?" A tall and slender elf greeted them with a smile. Casha sized up the elf waitress and nodded slightly. "Two, this way please." The elf smiled and led Casha in. They actually use elves as waitresses? The monthly salary of elves with such looks is no less than 15,000 copper coins. The cost is 5 times that of a normal human waitress. Casha followed behind that elf with a frown. Some restaurants used elves or beautiful demons as waitresses to increase the number of people entering the restaurant. After entering the door, Casha stopped in his tracks and looked at the magnificent hall with a surprised expression. There were hundreds of hot pot tables in this hall that was more than 1,000 square meters. The scale was more than double that of Casha's hall. At this moment, more than half of the seats were occupied. The boiling hot pot was giving off a hot and spicy smell, and it was very lively. What surprised him even more was that all the waitresses in this hot pot restaurant were elves. Beautiful young elves were scattered around the hall, serving the customers with smiles on their faces. There were about 30 elves scattered around the hall on the first floor. According to the market price, the salary paid to these elves by moonlight was about 400,000 to 500,000 copper coins, and this didn't include the chef's salary. At Casha Hot Pot Restaurant, the total salary of the chef, waitress, and various managers was only about 250,000 copper coins. Could it be that the boss of Mamie's is planning to expand the scale of Mamie's Hot Pot Restaurant? This hot pot restaurant is set up to compete with Mamie's? Casha was puzzled. With such a configuration, only Mamie's could compare to this restaurant in the Aiden Square. "Sir?" The elf leading the way stopped and turned around to look at him with a smile. "Where would you like to eat?" "I like crowds. Pick a seat in the middle for me," Casha said with a smile. "All right, this way, please." The elf nodded slightly and led them to a seat near the center. "Please wait for a moment. Someone will take your order very soon." The elven waiter smiled and left. "Boss, this hot pot restaurant is so big." The secretary looked around and was a little speechless. "They still have the second floor." Casha glanced at the spiral staircase on the left. This hot pot restaurant had broken the rules and set the kitchen on the second floor. They had even set up private rooms on the second floor to accommodate the diverse needs of the customers. Their business is so good. Will it affect our shop? The secretary asked worriedly as she looked at Casha with her big, watery eyes. "You'll know once you see the menu." Casha looked around. From the door, the entire hall was very spacious. Although there were some green plants, it didn't affect the transparency of the space at all. However, after sitting down, he realized that although the distance between each table and chair wasn't far, they were cleverly separated by various green plants or thin bamboo curtains. This avoided the awkwardness of always making eye contact with the customers at the next table during the meal. Casha was deep in thought. The taste of the dishes determined whether the customers would spend money in the restaurant, and the dining experience determined whether the customers would spend money again. It's indeed a restaurant opened by the boss of Mamie's. Even the details are done so well. Casha muttered to himself with a heavy heart. An elf walked over with a menu, and said with a smile, "Hello, excuse me. This is the menu. Please take a look at what you would like to order." Kasia took the menu and took a deep breath before flipping it open. Looking at the vivid pictures and prices on the menu, Kasia's hand that was holding the menu trembled slightly, and many fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. The secretary leaned forward slightly and also covered her mouth in shock when she saw the prices on the menu. The prices of the various dishes on the menu were very close to Kasia's hot pot. In fact, the vegetarian dishes were even cheaper than Kasia's hot pot. The elf was a little surprised by their reactions, but she didn't show it on her face. She just stood at the side, quietly. Set a mandarin duck hot pot soup base, then duck intestines, tripe, spicy beef, and these. Kasia ordered with a slightly hoarse voice. "All right, please wait a moment." The elf took back the menu and left with a smile. "Boss, what should we do? Their prices are almost the same as ours," the secretary said to Kasia with a melancholic look. "Shut up," Kasia said with a sullen face. His right hand was tapping on the table lightly, and his left hand had already clenched into a fist subconsciously. If there was an opponent that he didn't want to face the most, it would definitely be Meg. He had to admit that Meg was a genius chef who had created such a delicious and unique delicacy like hot pot. On the other hand, he was just a clumsy imitator. He had never thought of surpassing Meg. He didn't even have the thought of chasing after him. He only wanted to earn some money at different levels of Amy's. There was a mountain between the well and the river. However, he never expected that Meg would actually start to enter the low-end hot pot market. Moreover, he was so generous right off the bat. Matching the price with Kasia's meant that they would be facing the same customers. There would be an extremely intense competition between Mana Hot Pot and Kasia Hot Pot. Kasia was indeed a little flustered. Not long after, the Mandarin Duck Hot Pot and various ingredients that Kasia ordered were served on the table. The soup of the Mandarin Duck Hot Pot was as white as milk, and the red soup was as hot as fire. The rich aroma was already wafting over together with the steam. Just a whiff of it was enough to drive away the chill that had just come in from outside. Kasia looked at the soup pot in front of him and pursed his lips in silence for a long time. He had already lost with just this pot of soup. Then, his gaze landed on the dishes on the table. The duck intestine was cut open from the middle, washed thoroughly, and soaked in clear water. The tripe was cut into slices of the same size, and there were no impurities on the surface of the black film. All of the dishes were exquisitely arranged, and the degree of completion was no less than Amy's. After a moment of silence, Kasia picked up his chopsticks, added a piece of duck intestine, and heated it in the pot. Then, he put it into his mouth. The spicy soup exploded in his mouth, and the crispness of the duck intestine was perfectly released during chewing. The fragrant and spicy red soup removed the fishy smell of the duck intestine, and at the same time gave the duck intestine a wonderful taste. The crunching sound almost made his tongue chew. "Eat," Kasia said to the timid secretary. Then, he continued to add various ingredients into the hot pot. "Okay." The secretary answered carefully and ate carefully. She stole glances at Kasia from time to time. The hot pot meal ended in silence. Kasia settled the bill and left with the secretary. "Boss, I've already informed the market. Our people will be guarding the entrance of their restaurant tonight, and we will be able to confirm their suppliers very soon. From the ingredients, that's enough. Cancel all these plans." Kasia interrupted the secretary. "But if our opponent was someone else, this method might be useful," Kasia said with a self-deprecating laugh. Kasia laughed self-deprecatingly. "But our opponent just had to be the boss of Mamie Restaurant. He's the city lord's favorite now. I don't want to be the second Bennett if I play such tricks in front of him." The secretary's expression changed slightly upon hearing that. She hesitated for a moment and said, "What should our hot pot restaurant do? From tomorrow onwards, cancel all activities and close the restaurant for a week. Get the people in charge of cutting ingredients to go to Mana Hot Pot Restaurant for 2 meals a day. I will pay for the expenses. Get them to figure out how to wash, cut, and display the ingredients within a week. If anyone fails to meet the standards after a week, fire them all." Kasia paused and said to the secretary, "Also, You will be in charge of setting the price of the new dishes. Lower the current price by 30%. Kasha Hot Pot Restaurant will be making a hot pot with an average price of 60 copper coins. If you can't beat them, just run. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1682. Congratulations, host. Mana Hot Pot Restaurant has more than 1,000 new customers on the first day of opening. The recipe for mutton soup has been released. Host, please learn it as soon as possible. Meg had just coaxed Amy to sleep when the system's voice appeared in his mind. A mission that I completed without doing anything. Meg smirked and said with a hint of mockery, System, remember to release more missions like this in the future. I'm really bored without any missions to do. Since the host has passed the initial stage of culinary skills training, the system's mission bank will automatically upgrade to the intermediate difficulty. Please look forward to it. The system's voice sounded. Don't. Brother, I'm just kidding. Meg was instantly shocked. He didn't expect the system's missions to be divided into different levels. Furthermore, the previous mission was only at the elementary level. Then what was the advanced level? Is Amy asleep? Irina appeared in the room and glanced at Amy, who was sleeping soundly on the bed with ugly duckling in her arms. She turned to look at Meg and said, Then we should set off now. We're going to the Thunderstorm Mountains tonight. Meg looked at Irina in surprise. Yes, Crassus and I went to the east today and wiped out a village that believed in demons. According to their leader, many of their companions are gathering near the Thunderstorm Mountains. However, his level is too low, so he doesn't know why, Irina said with a nod. The village was wiped out. Meg asked Irina. No, I've informed Roland. The Grey Temple arrested all of them and interrogated them individually. Irina shook her head. Wait a moment. Let me change my clothes. Meg nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He returned to his room to change his clothes and put on the transformation mask. Let's go. They're already waiting for us outside the city. Irina gently held onto Meg's arm. A faint golden light flashed under their feet, and they disappeared from the room. On the peak of a mountain outside the city, Crosset chuckled as he looked at Mag and Irina, who were sitting on a griffin, and said, Roar, roar. We really can't get up here if you two are so showy. Azee is a giant magical beast, and it's also the fastest magical beast. Irina looked at them with a smile. Are you sure you don't want to ride it? Of course I'm going to sit on it. It's a rare opportunity. Crassus jumped onto the griffin's back without hesitation. Julian also boarded the griffin. Azee, go to the Thunderstorm Mountains, Meg instructed before greeting Crassus and Julian. He saw the two of them almost every day, but it felt a little different to interact with them with a different identity through a mask. He had to speak and act in a different way. Alex, you two haven't fought for 3 or 4 years. Why don't we have a spar? Crassus chuckled as he looked at Meg. 3 against 1? Irina and Azee turned to look at Crassus at the same time. Crassus' expression stiffened, and he said helplessly, You win. He really couldn't win against 3 of them. Your body doesn't seem to have fully recovered. Julian looked at Meg and narrowed his eyes. Mag's heart skipped a beat. No wonder Urian was a 10th tier great magic caster. He could actually tell that Mag's power had not fully recovered. One had to know that Mag's pretentious appearance and the aura he was releasing were already far beyond the normal 9th tier aura. After he retracted it slightly, no one would suspect anything. It's just a small problem. Meg didn't deny it and said calmly, Since you were able to kill Benson, it means it's not a big problem. Julian nodded and didn't ask further. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. Amy's master was indeed a character. However, it was good that he didn't ask further. It saved him the trouble of explaining. All right, Alex never needs to explain to anyone. Meg's eyes lit up as he immediately stopped the reason he had prepared in his mind. We are going to enter the cave today to check out the situation underground. Crassus stopped smiling and said with a solemn expression, There have been a few anomalies in the Thunderstorm Mountains recently. Unidentified people have gathered there, and I'm afraid it has something to do with the seal being broken. We have to cut off the source, or it might cause more trouble. How to reseal that thing is a big problem. I used ice to block the gap previously, but it didn't work so far, Julian said with a hoarse voice. Why do we have to reseal it? Can't we just kill it directly? Irina asked, perplexed. From the magic it released, I'm afraid we don't have the ability to do that. Crassus shook his head. If killing it was a simple matter, the people back then wouldn't have needed to go through so much trouble to seal it. Perhaps we could try Irina's holy light spell. I'm afraid physical methods and ordinary magic won't be able to cause any substantial damage to it, Meg suggested. Let's wait until we see it before making a decision. It might really be an impressive fellow. Crassus revealed a smile again. I haven't met a decent opponent in a long time. The Griffin quickly arrived near the Thunderstorm Mountains. Meg got Az to slow down and lower its altitude so that it could fly close to the mountains. The Thunderstorm Mountains were named after the thunder and lightning all year round. During the winter, the thunder and lightning were calm, but lightning could still be seen in the caves between the mountains. Sometimes, lightning would fall on the rocks and tree trunks, and there would be dazzling sparks and loud noises. Looking down from the sky, one could see more than 10 bonfires burning in this mountain range that was supposed to be uninhabited. Other than the dragon race, there are all kinds of races. There are about 500 of them, Julian said as he looked down. There are quite a lot of people. It seems like they have some way to contact the sealed fellow, Crassus said with a frown. It's just a bunch of weaklings. Let's catch them and beat them up. Then we'll know everything, Irina said nonchalantly. Numbers meant nothing to them. That makes sense. Then let's split up and take care of 4 of them each. Crassus grabbed his magic caster's staff and jumped down. Leave the 4 in the west to me. A blue light flashed under Julian's feet, and he disappeared as well. I'll leave the one below to you. I'll take care of the remaining 7. Irina pointed at the biggest bonfire below and turned into a golden light as she flew toward another bonfire. Az, wait for me here. I'll go steal some oranges for you. Meg also jumped down with his sword. Mag fell from a height of several hundred meters, and his long sword almost sliced a large tree in half before he landed lightly on the ground. Let's see what these guys are doing here. Mag sheathed his sword and approached the bright bonfire 200 meters away. A strange chanting sound gradually became clearer, and it sounded as if a devil was whispering underground. It was accompanied by a low roar that sounded like a devil's, and the atmosphere was very strange. Ding! New mission. It's detected that the host is close to a powerful, unknown creature. Please obtain 500 grams of the creature's meat within 24 hours and submit it to the system as a research sample. At that moment, the system's voice rang in Meg's mind. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1683. Mag stopped in his tracks and shockingly said, System, you're not talking about slicing the great old one up for research, are you? The knowledge left behind by our ancestors tells us that any organic creature has the potential to be food. Dissecting the complicated fog on the surface of things, the essence is the same. Whether the great old ones can be eaten or not is not a problem. The question is whether steaming or braising would be more delicious, the system replied calmly. Meg opened his mouth, but couldn't find the words to refute. So, the host only needs to obtain a 500g serving of meat and hand it over as the system's research object, the system continued. Wait. Meg frowned and suddenly realized that something was wrong. He rolled his eyes and said, That's the great old ones, an immortal existence that was sealed countless years ago, an existence with terrifying abilities. Now you want me to cut up a piece of his meat for you to research? Isn't this mission out of my scope? I'm just a chef. What's wrong with complaining on Weibo that other people's dishes are not good? They didn't curse me to catch the great old ones for research, right? The system was silent for a while, then said, After the appearance of the great old ones, the food chain of this world has indeed exceeded the upper limit of the punishment set at the beginning, which is the so-called out of scope. Then I refuse this mission, Meg said without hesitation. If the great old ones were so easy to kill, the people back then wouldn't have had to spend so much effort to seal them here. Wouldn't it be delicious if each person took half a kilogram of meat home and braised it? Judging from the system's words, the person who threw him into this world probably didn't study this world seriously. This was beyond the scope of the system's assistance. He didn't believe that a gourmet system without integrity could deal with a great apocalypse dominator. Not everyone could blossom with two flowers. Mission success. The host will receive a comprehensive inspection report of a new species, including racial analysis, various tolerance studies, weakness analysis. The system's tempting voice sounded again. Inspection report? Meg frowned and fell into a dilemma. He had to admit that the mission reward was indeed very tempting. Most of the fear towards the great old ones stemmed from the fear of the unknown. Otherwise, what was so scary about a tentacle monster? There were plenty of perverts with such fetishes. If the system could provide a comprehensive test report and tear off the mysterious cloak of the great old ones, it might really be able to find a way to deal with the great old ones. He didn't want to pin his hopes on those gods whose existence he didn't know. The feeling of having one's fate in one's own hands was the most wonderful feeling. What if the mission fails? Mission failure. I believe that the host will not need to receive any punishment at that time. Equals convex Meg chose to accept the mission. Of course, whether he accepted it or not, the mission was there, and the countdown had started. With the system stirring things up, the terrifying atmosphere created by the bonfire party was completely gone. Once he thought about the crazy beliefs of these fellows and the possibility of them becoming the system's next breeding target, Meg suddenly felt that the so-called terror had become tasteless. However, since he had already contracted this party, Meg naturally had to go and take a look. He crossed the woods, knocked out a demon who seemed to be on the lookout, and stood on the branch of a big tree about 100 meters away from the bonfire. Not far away, a huge bonfire was burning on the flat ground. Hundreds of demons, humans, and orcs were naked, dancing a twisted and strange dance around the bonfire. The flickering light of the fire illuminated their crazed, grinning faces and reflected a strange light in their eyes. In front of the bonfire, a 2-meter-tall, bamboo-like thin man with disheveled hair was waving a black scepter. The demon-like whisper came from his mouth. They seemed to be carrying out some kind of sacrificial ceremony, and the bamboo-like man should be the priest. Only he was still wearing a tattered black robe. Around the bonfire, animal corpses were scattered on the ground, and their heads were uniformly facing the direction of the bonfire. Meg frowned as he looked at this strange and promiscuous scene. If it was someone who did not have a strong mind power, they would have fainted on the spot. However, his gaze was quickly attracted to the 3 children who were tied up in front of the bamboo-like priest. They were 3 children who were less than 10 years old, 2 girls and 1 boy. They were tied together with a rope back to back, screaming in horror. It was even more terrifying in the midst of the chanting and whispers. The chanting stopped abruptly, and the priest walked in front of the 3 children. He raised the scepter in his hand high above his head, as if he was ready to smash it down directly. Everyone present grinned hideously as they surrounded the 3 children. Their eyes flashed with red light, as if they were looking at the food that was already on the table. Use our blood as a sacrifice to help the gods escape. The priest shouted loudly. Kill! Those guys pulled out daggers and sharp branches out of nowhere and stabbed at their hearts. The priest also smashed the scepter in his hand toward the 3 children with a crazy face. These bastards! Meg's expression changed slightly, and he threw the long sword in his hand, which turned into a long rainbow and went straight toward the priest. Why are they all dead? About 3 minutes later, Irina appeared and looked at the tragic scene, a little puzzled. In order to stop them from committing suicide, I killed them. Meg shrugged, then pointed at the 3 unconscious children lying on the grass, looked at Irina, and said, Can you erase their memories? Okay. Irina walked toward the 3 children and silently chanted a spell. With a wave of her hand, 3 golden streams of light went into the middle of their eyebrows. After a while, Crassus and Julian also returned. Those who have been bewitched by the devil are really disgusting. Crassus raised his hand and burned the corpses to ashes. They should be performing some kind of sacrificial ritual. I heard them say that they wanted to help the gods escape. Meg frowned. Yes, and this operation should have been going on for a few days. The demonic aura in the core area is getting thicker. The guy might be preparing to escape. Julian also looked serious. Let's go and see. Irina waved her hand and set up a barrier around the three children and walked toward the sealed place first. There is nothing that a fireball can't solve. If there is, then let's use 10 more. Crassus smiled confidently. Frost may not be able to stop the demonic aura from leaking, but it can freeze all living things. Julian also said calmly. Meg was surprised by the confidence of the two big bosses and also followed. After hesitating for a while, he whispered, "Then can I cut some of that guy's meat later?" Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1684. The three people in front stopped and turned to look at Meg at the same time. Alex, you're really something. While we're still thinking about how to solve the problem, you're already thinking about how to distribute the spoils. Crassus looked at Meg with some emotion. I was this crazy when I was young. No, you weren't. Julian shook his head. When you were young, you could only be beaten up. That was because I gave in to them. Crassus's aura suddenly weakened a little. When he first created the close combat spell, he did suffer a lot because he was young. Almost all the mages of the same age beat him up. The worst thing was that he was beaten up by the mages who were younger than him. The past. Let's not talk about it. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. He was not trying to show off. He just wanted to complete the mission. However, since he had already said it, he could only pretend to be calm. Fry or roast? Irina asked with a serious face. What does a demon taste like? I haven't tasted it yet. We have to see the real thing to decide. Meg thought for a while and said. Crassus and Julian looked at the two of them. One dared to ask, and the other dared to answer. The filthy people who believed in demons had been dealt with. The thunderstorm mountains regained its peace. Only the cold wind howled in the mountains, and the occasional thunder could be heard. In the middle of a snow-covered plain deep in the mountains, there was a pitch-black hole. Crassus raised his hand and threw a fireball in the direction of the hole. The pitch-black hole, with a diameter of 2 meters, seemed to be able to swallow the light. When the fireball entered, the light disappeared instantly, as if it had never appeared. Above the hole, there was a strange black fog that seemed to be hiding some kind of ghost that was wriggling and twisting crazily. The place of the seal is there. Julian stopped 5 meters away and looked at the black fog with a serious expression. This black fog is very difficult to deal with. Everything below the cave entrance is shrouded in black fog. I can't see anything, and my spiritual power is also very limited. I can't investigate the situation below. Although its aura is a little different, this black fog is not much different from the black fog we encountered before. Leave it to me. Irina stepped forward with a relaxed expression and raised the magic caster staff in her hand. The black fog seemed to have sensed a threat, and after squirming for a while, it surged toward Irina. Holy light, please heed my call and purify this evil. Irina chanted loudly, and a dazzling holy light burst forth from her magic caster's staff. The evil black fog was illuminated by the holy light and instantly melted like ice and fire. Accompanied by a sickening shriek, the black fog that filled the air above the hole was quickly eliminated. The holy light is indeed unique in its ability to eliminate evil. Julian nodded thoughtfully. Ice-type magic could barely cover up the hole, but could do nothing to purify the black fog. The goddess of light was born to stand on the opposite side of evil. It's not a big deal to be able to purify evil. However, Irina should be the only great light-type magic caster in this world, right? Crassus' tone was filled with regret and worry. Next, it's below. Irina's gaze fell on the hole. She raised her magic caster's staff high, and a larger ray of holy light than before pierced into the hole. A terrifying shriek like that of a ghost came from the hole, and the originally pitch-black hole became brighter under the illumination of the holy light. Everyone stuck their heads out to look down. The holy light had yet to disperse. The hole below was not a straight passage, but more like a huge cave. The hole was an opening above this cave. "This cave looks very deep," Crassus said with a frown. "We can all see it." Julian rolled his eyes. "Are we going to jump down like this?" Irina was already eager to try. The unknown was not scary to her. Instead, she found it challenging and interesting. "I'll lead the charge." Crassus was the first to jump down. 3 fireballs floated in front of him, illuminating the path below. "Let's go." Julian followed suit and jumped down. Soon, a flight of ice stairs appeared under his feet. Every time he took a step down, a flight of stairs would appear. It was as if he was taking a stroll in the air. He looked like an expert. "How are we going to go down?" Meg looked at Irina and asked. Although he could guarantee that he would not fall to his death, it was still not in line with the style of the world's best knight. "You jump, I'll jump." Irina looked at Meg affectionately. "Then let's go." Meg grabbed Irina's hand and jumped down into the hole. The cave was pitch black. Only Crassus led the way with 3 fireballs, illuminating and warming the area. Meg looked around. No one would have thought that there would be such a huge cave under the Thunderstorm Mountains. This is not a natural cave. It should have been dug out. However, it was done a long time ago, even longer than the history of the elves. Irina casually tossed out a few flares as she looked at the stone wall in the distance that had been leveled and chiseled out. "It seems like these guys are really left behind from ancient times. They are still alive after so many years," Julian said with a hoarse voice. "The good news is that they might have lost most of their power due to time and the seal." Crassus smiled casually. "The bad news is that we might not even be able to defeat them in such a state." Irina shrugged. "That's really bad." Crassus was speechless. He could not deny the existence of such a possibility. "We're going to reach the bottom," Crassus reminded. 2 fireballs suddenly appeared under his feet, and his rapidly falling body began to slow down. Julian was still walking down at a steady pace. Irina suddenly grabbed Meg's waist and leaned back. She changed her original head-down landing position to her feet facing down. Layers of golden silk threads appeared under her feet. Every time the net broke, her speed would decrease. When she landed on the ground, it was as if she had taken a light step. She stepped on the ground steadily and lightly. "My lady, you have great qigong," Meg praised in his heart. He naturally held the long sword at his waist. The cave was more than 1,000 meters deep. It was colder than the surface. The surroundings were very empty. Crassus' fireballs and Irina's magic caster staff could not light up the cave much. "The demonic aura is coming from this direction." Irina turned around and pointed in a direction. "Let's go. Let's meet this ancient remnant." Crassus held his magic caster's staff and walked in front. The 3 fireballs split into 6 and surrounded everyone. There was still 1 fireball in front. No pop-up window. Chapter 1685. There were also countless complicated passageways in the massive cave. The black mist within the cave had been dispersed, but there was still dense black mist gathered in the passageways. Thus, Irina could only release a holy light barrier to envelop everyone while she continued to venture deeper into the cave, using her perception of the source of the black mist. Everyone was very fast. After about 15 minutes, Irina stopped. The holy light barrier shattered, and the black fog in the passage dispersed, revealing the huge stone door at the end of the passage. The black stone door was about 100 meters tall, and there seemed to be a huge mural carved on it. Crassus let 3 fireballs fly near the stone door, and everyone could finally see the image carved on the door clearly. Everyone was shocked. Terrifying scenes were depicted on the huge murals. Dragons were tearing and killing each other. Forest trolls were twisting off the heads of their companions while holding half of an elf in their mouths. Scarlet-eyed goblins were riding on orcs as they chased after a group of monkeys. The endless sea was dyed red with blood, and countless corpses of demons floated on the surface of the sea as they were torn apart and eaten by a school of terrifying fish in the center of the mural. There was an indescribable object as huge as a hill. The giant dragons were as small as mosquitoes in front of it, and countless tentacles were reaching out from the hexagonal seal on top of its head. Those tentacles were filled with crimson eyes that were shining with a demonic light, as if they were about to break out of the seal. "What kind of monster is this?" Crassus was also shocked and exclaimed, "There's actually such a disgusting existence in this world. Evil must be used to describe it." Irina also shifted her gaze away in disgust. "This scene seems familiar. The scene we saw when we entered the cannibal island was similar to this." Julian narrowed his eyes and raised his hoarse voice. "This should be the Great Old One, or the Devil. It's similar to the stone statue that the hairless monk found in the Urba tribe." Meg also looked at the huge mural with a solemn expression. The scene in the mural was very similar to what Rex had described back then. If the stone statue could be said to be the imagination of those believers, then this huge mural that had been passed down from ancient times must be a warning left behind by the person who sealed it back then. What lies in eternal slumber may not be death. Meg saw a classic sentence in the corner of the mural. He had seen this sentence in many books recently. Perhaps it was some kind of coincidence or some kind of necessity. In that case, he's locked in here now, right? Crassus gripped his magic caster's staff tightly, and his expression became solemn. "Come on, let's go meet this big guy," Irina said eagerly. "Aren't you afraid?" "If I remember correctly, you're most afraid of these long tentacles?" Urian asked as he turned to Irina. "Are you sure?" Irina's question, "The world, that won't happen. We still have something precious to protect. Mages." The towering door seemed to be specially designed for giants. Julian faced the door and closed his eyes. Wisps of frost quickly covered the door. About a minute later, Julian opened his eyes. He raised his hand, and a few ice balls flew out, hitting different spots on the stone door. Accompanied by a dull creaking sound, the huge door began to move backward slowly. "Be careful," Irina reminded. She raised her hand and cast a blessing of holy light on each of them. As the door opened, a thick black fog began to surge out from the crack of the door. It was accompanied by a dull murmur, like a demon from the abyss. The black fog crashed into the blessing of holy light and dispersed. Meg held his sword with both hands and slowly walked into the world behind the door. The dazzling holy light destroyed the black fog and pierced through the darkness. Behind the huge door was a spacious cave that was hundreds of meters tall. On an altar engraved with countless ancient runes, countless black chains were intertwined to bind a huge object that was as big as a small mountain. The four of them raised their heads to look at this scene, and their eyes were filled with shock. It was an extremely huge octopus. Countless tentacles stretched out from its body. Those tentacles were full of eyes, and each eye was suffused with a demonic red light. A hexagram seal was suppressing its head. It flickered with a faint golden light, as if it would be destroyed at any time. Kiki, that octopus monster, seemed to have heard the sound of the door opening, and it let out a strange roar. Meg felt as if he was suddenly being stared at by countless pairs of eyes. Those eyes seemed to be all looking at them. One tentacle after another suddenly extended and surged toward the door. This was definitely a nightmare for people with trypophobia. Meg raised his sword and prepared to fight. Crassus and Julian also held their magic caster's staff and magic wand respectively. However, just as those tentacles were about to reach Meg and the others, a faint golden wall suddenly rose around the altar. The tentacles hit the golden wall as if they had hit a wall of fire. There was a sizzling sound of corrosion, and those tentacles actually started to melt at a speed visible to the naked eye. That huge object let out a sharp cry, and the countless tentacles suddenly retracted. The design of this seal is quite reasonable. Irina smiled as she put away her magic caster's staff. She walked around the altar and wondered, could this be that fellow's head? It should be. Just a head is so huge. One can only imagine how huge its body is. Meg also put away his long sword and sized up this octopus monster with a frown. The tentacles were wrapped in brownish-green mucus, and the squirming tentacles were nauseating. Should we burn it with fire or freeze it? Crassus asked as he stroked his chin. Urian walked around the entire altar with a grave expression as he said, "Normal magic is completely ineffective against the black mist, so there's no way that it'll have much of an effect on him. He's not in a very active state, which means that this sealing spell formation is still effective. The safest way is to seal him again on top of this spell formation. This fellow's body contains extremely terrifying magic power. Once it is released, we will definitely not be a match for it." Crassus frowned as he stared at the octopus monster for a while. He nodded and said, "All right, I'll listen to you this time. What do you think?" Irina turned to look at Meg. Meg agreed with Julian's words very much. This was just ahead of the great old one that had been cut off and sealed for countless years. But standing in front of it still made him feel insignificant, as if he was facing an eternity. He had to admit that even if the four of them joined forces, they still had no confidence in fighting this fellow after breaking free from the seal. However, he had a mission. Sealing it again was just a delaying tactic. If they could not find a way to deal with these great old ones, they would still break free one day and harm the world. "I want to try slashing it," Meg said seriously. Chapter 1686. The three of them stared at Meg and fell into deep thought. Meg looked at them and also fell into deep thought. He really didn't want to show off. He had no other choice. "I'll just slash it once," Meg said tentatively. "All right, if you're a man, I'll slash it with you," Crassus said as he patted his chest. "I can slow down its movements." Julian nodded slightly. "I can use the holy light to open a path for you within the seal. However, the density of the black fog inside is unpredictable, so the time it will take may be very short. You have to return immediately after slashing it," Irina said with a smile. "All right," Meg nodded. He held his sword with both hands and stood in front of the altar. He exhaled softly, and his expression became extremely solemn. "It's coming," Irina shouted softly. A bright holy light shot out from her magic caster's staff and instantly illuminated the cave. It forcibly opened a path in the thick black fog and rushed straight toward the octopus monster's glabella. It left a black scorch mark several meters deep between its eyebrows, but it was still unable to cause any substantial damage to it. Almost at the same time, Julian slammed his magic caster's staff on the ground. The temperature in the cave suddenly dropped by tens of degrees. Frost began to spread rapidly from his feet to the octopus monster. Soon, a layer of white frost condensed on the octopus monster's tentacles. The speed of its wriggling decreased visibly, and its movements were obviously slowed and restricted. "Hey, have a taste of my big fireball," Julian shouted as he leaped up tens of meters high. He waved his magic caster's staff at the octopus monster, and huge red fireballs flew toward it like meteorites. Kiki, the octopus monster, seemed to be angered by their actions. It let out a low growl and swung its tentacles to disperse most of the fireballs. However, a few fireballs still landed on its tentacles and exploded, leaving charred marks on its body. However, the injuries were quickly healed. Now, the moment Irina's holy light was activated, Meg had already chased after the light and rushed into the seal. He raised his long sword and slashed down on the nearest tentacle. The Tiandu sword was not a very sharp sword, but it was a very hard sword. Combined with his sword skills and strength, it was almost invincible. However, when the sword landed on the tentacle, it felt as though it had slashed into a swamp. The sticky and soft sensation removed most of the force from the longsword, while the countless suction cups on the tentacle followed the momentum and firmly held onto the Tiandu sword, making it difficult for him to pull the longsword back. Pairs of scarlet eyes were fixed on Meg, like wild beasts staring at their prey. More tentacles were coming in his direction, which meant that the octopus monster had noticed the intruder. His attack had failed, and his sword was stuck to the tentacle. There was probably nothing worse than this. At that moment, Meg only had one choice, which was to abandon the sword and leave. Irina and the others should be able to leave a path for him to return. Meg glanced at the Tiandu sword in his hand. The hilt of the sword flickered with a faint light, as though it wanted to say something. In that split second, Meg suddenly drew fat head carp from his waist and stood on the tentacle. Clack! With a crisp sound, the tentacle that was as thick as a human's waist broke. It's done. Meg's eyes lit up. He did not have the time to be stunned. He put fat head carp back into the scabbard at his waist and carried the Tian-Du sword with the tentacle on his shoulder. Then he turned and ran. The path left behind by the holy light was constantly shrinking. The black fog on both sides was crazily squirming and squeezing in. Behind him, countless tentacles were rushing toward him. Bang! Meg almost crashed out of the seal. He reached out and pressed his hand on the stone wall, leaving a half-foot deep palm print. Behind him, countless tentacles crashed into the golden light wall. The light wall flickered, and the tentacles that collided with it melted away. The octopus monster also let out an angry roar. As expected of Alex. Such courage and boldness. There is no other person in the younger generation who can match you. Crassus looked at Meg with admiration. Only when you're infinitely close to death can you understand the true meaning of survival. Meg wiped off his cold sweat and tried to be as calm as possible. I didn't expect that this devil's tentacle could really be cut off. Julian looked at the tentacle that was still stuck on Meg's sword with surprise. After leaving the seal, the tentacle had shrunk by more than half. However, it was still as thick as an adult's thigh. It was only 1 meter long, and there were 8 eyes on it. After being cut off, the red light had disappeared. However, it still looked very strange and terrifying. This monster should have a very strong self-healing ability. The severed tentacle can be completely restored in 3 breaths. Therefore, it doesn't matter to it if a few tentacles are cut off. Irina looked at the octopus monster that had recovered all of its tentacles, including the injuries that Crassus had inflicted on it. The damage caused by the holy light magic is indeed more severe than ordinary magic. It's not so easy to restore. Julian looked at the wound between the octopus monster's eyebrows and said thoughtfully, "In that seal, I can clearly feel the strength of this guy. Its body contains unimaginable energy, and it also has incomparably strong mental strength," Meg said as the only person who had entered the seal. "It seems that we can only strengthen the seal so that it can't escape for the time being and attract its followers here. Then we can slowly think of a way." Julian frowned and began to walk around the altar to study the ancient runes. "If you need materials, I have some here. See if you can use them." Crassus threw a storage ring to Julian. "I also have a batch of formation materials here." Irina waved her staff, and a pile of materials that shone with various colors appeared in front of her. Meg quietly pulled the Tian-Du sword out of the tentacle when no one was paying attention. Then he used fathead fish to cut off a section of the octopus tentacle with eyes, and said in his heart, "System, hurry up and accept this fresh tentacle of the great old one." Ding! An unknown powerful creature ingredient has been detected. Checked and accepted. Congratulations to the host for completing the high-level mission. You have obtained a great old one ingredient. The test report will be sent to the host in 24 hours. Please check and accept it. The octopus tentacle in Meg's hand disappeared, and the system's voice sounded in his mind at the same time. Although they didn't know what the system could detect, this was probably the only thing they could look forward to at the moment. Perhaps they could find a way to restrain this octopus monster from the test report. The terrifying thing about the Great Old One was not how strong their physical body was, but their ability to influence and control the mental strength of creatures everywhere. Even if they were sealed thousands of meters underground and shrouded in layers of formations, they could still influence this world. Chapter 1687. The restoration of the spell formation was not as smooth as they had imagined. Julian was already considered an experienced spell formation master, but this spell formation was really too old. Many things needed a long period of research before they could be sure. Otherwise, once they misunderstood and added rashly, it might cause the entire spell formation to collapse. "I need some time, and I need to find a few spell formation masters to restore it together," Julian said to the 3 of them in a low voice. When it comes to spell formations, Novin is naturally the best in Chaos City. I can invite him over, Crassus said. Ashley is one of the best spell formation masters in the Elven race. She should have studied many ancient spell formations in the Elven race. I can get her to assist you, Irina said. The first person that came to Mag's mind was Babla. Although this maiden was a little unreliable and wasn't considered a spell formation master at her young age, she had said more than once that she had repaired an ancient teleportation portal to teleport herself from the Moon Nation to the Norland continent. There were almost no records of the Moon Nation on the Norland continent, but the languages of the two worlds were similar. This was as suspicious as the gap in the records of the Great Old Ones. Perhaps the time when the Moon Nation lost contact with the Norland continent was close to the time when the Great Old Ones existed. In that case, the teleportation portal that Barbara had restored might be from the same time period as the spell formation on this altar. Perhaps she could understand this sealing spell formation a little. Since that's the case, let's leave first. I will use the Holy Light spell to set up an isolation spell formation here. It can last for about 7 days to ensure that the demonic aura will not leak out. Irina chose 6 silvery white stones from the materials that she had just taken out and placed them around the altar. After that, she used her magic caster's staff to draw some complicated lines and runes between them. Irina activated the spell formation, and rays of faint golden light were emitted from the 6 stones, forming 6 light screens that surrounded the entire altar. The octopus monster in the seal did not move anymore. It only let out an obscure low growl that was like the devil's whisper echoing in the cave. It also sounded like some kind of weird mockery. Hold your breath and focus. Don't be fooled by his voice. Let's leave this place immediately. Urian's expression suddenly turned serious as he slapped a frost spell on Cross's face. Crossu was in a daze. Crassus woke up from his stupor, and his expression changed slightly. He quickly followed Julian and retreated out of the cave. He said with lingering fear, "This monster's bewitchment is really scary. I don't even know when I fell into its trap." Meg held the long sword in one hand and bit the tip of his tongue to keep himself awake. His other hand grabbed Irina's hand and rushed out of the cave. About 5 minutes later, a group of people jumped out of the hole. Who? Everyone exhaled in unison. Firstly, the air underground was indeed a little dirty. Secondly, he felt like he had escaped death. Meg wasn't that bad. He didn't have a strong attachment to the strong. However, Julian and Crassus were a little different. After all, they were legends who had reached the peak for many years. They couldn't help but feel a little indescribable when they suddenly discovered that there were beings who were far more powerful than them in this world. I think we have to keep this a secret for the time being. If someone with ulterior motives destroys the seal and releases this fellow, I'm afraid it won't be easy for us to lock it up again, Mag said to everyone. Greed can never be satisfied. We can't guarantee that other people can resist its temptation. We can't even guarantee that we can resist its temptation. The fewer people who know about this place, the better. Julian nodded. I agree. Apart from the array masters who repair the array, we shouldn't let anyone know about this for now. Irina nodded. I have no objection. If you don't want me to say it, then I won't say it. Crassus nodded indifferently. Then what do we do with this tentacle? Meg raised the tentacle that was still stuck on his long sword and asked. The thick tentacle was covered in a layer of sticky dark green mucus. The dead fish eyes looked weird and disgusting. Why don't we roast it for supper? I'm a little hungry, Crassus suggested. Dig out the eyes and roast them separately? That way, we won't have to waste the pig's eyes. Irina was deep in thought. Julian glanced at the tentacle and raised his eyebrows slightly. You guys go ahead. I won't eat it. I think we should keep it and use it as proof of the great old one's existence in the future. Meg shook his head and said, it wasn't that he couldn't bear to eat it, but whether this octopus tentacle could be eaten still depended on the system's test results. No one could guarantee what would happen to an old octopus that had lived for countless years. He didn't plan to test the poison himself. All right, Julian nodded. With a wave of his hand, a layer of ice appeared outside the octopus tentacle, sealing in ice. Meg whistled. Ozzy, who had been circling in the sky for a long time, turned into a purple lightning bolt and landed lightly in front of everyone. "What do we do with those fellows who were knocked out?" Irina asked. "Seal this hole temporarily and let the Grey Temple clean it up. They are more professional at this job." Meg carried the 3 unconscious children over and placed them gently on Ozzy's back. "That's a good idea. There are too many people, and it's too troublesome to move them back." Irina's eyes lit up, and she jumped onto the griffin's back with a smile. Julian waved his hand and sealed the hole again. At the same time, he used frost and snow to clean it up. Normal people wouldn't be able to tell what was so special about this place. The griffin flapped its wings and disappeared from the Thunderstorm Mountains very quickly. After returning to Chaos City, Meg handed the 3 children over to the City Lord's castle. The City Lord's castle might be able to help them find their families, or at least let them continue living in the orphanage. Crassus and Julian went to invite Novan, while Meg and Irina told Michael about the Thunderstorm Mountains and asked the Grey Temple to clean up the place. Michael stopped listening to Meg's description and looked at the octopus tentacle in shock. However, as the lord of a city, he calmed down very quickly. He looked at Meg and said, "All right, I will go and look for Roland personally and gather all the formation masters in Chaos City immediately for Julian and the rest to do their bidding." "All right." Meg nodded slightly. Michael was a trustworthy partner, and at the same time, a person in power who could provide them with more help. "Since that's the case, we will take our leave first." Meg bade farewell to Michael with Irina. After leaving the City Lord's castle, Irina directly teleported back to the first floor of the restaurant with Meg. Meg took off his mask and went into the kitchen to wash his hands. After that, he took 2 wine glasses and poured 2 glasses of wine. What happened tonight was a little too exciting. It was like dancing blades, and he had to drink some wine to calm himself down. Irina took the wine glass and smilingly asked Meg, "Why did you have to cut it just now?" Meg took a sip of the wine and calmly said, "I just couldn't stand it." Chapter 1688. Roland personally led 300 Grey Temple elites to the Thunderstorm Mountains on 3 eagles. After seeing the tragic scene, even the experienced investigators vomited on the spot. Burn all the corpses and bury them. Bring the living ones back and lock them up in the secret prison. Leave the interrogation to the intelligence department. Report to me directly. The rest have no right to know," Roland said with a sullen face as he retracted his gaze from the evil altar. "Yes," everyone agreed in unison. They immediately showed their professionalism. A big pit was quickly dug, and all the corpses were thrown into the pit. The fire magic casters threw a few fireballs, and the corpses immediately turned into ashes. They were then buried by the sand, and the ground returned to normal very quickly. "Let's go back." Roland led the team and left after making sure there were no omissions. Nobody asked anything during the whole process. Recently, the Grey Temple had taken over some strange cases and captured a bunch of strange people. However, they usually didn't have to do anything after they were dispatched. They only had to clean up the mess like a team of professional cleaners. However, these cases were kept confidential at the highest level in the Grey Temple. Even the members of the Grey Temple were forbidden from discussing it. If any news were to leak out, it wouldn't be as simple as disciplinary punishment. "My lord, these are the confessions of those fellows we caught during the day." Bolton walked into Roland's office, closed the door, and placed a stack of confessions sealed in craft paper on the table. He looked at Roland hesitantly and said, "What they said, a part of it is true." Roland picked up the craft paper bag and opened it. He flipped through the confessions. Bolton's expression changed slightly. Roland didn't say much, but there was a lot of information in it. Those fellows who were caught during the day were all crazy. They believed in a certain evil god and prayed that one day the evil god would reappear in the world and turn the Norland continent into a land of calamity. They would then become the evil god's slaves and obtain great power and eternal life. 1 or 2 such people might be able to be treated as coincidental mental disorders, but when such people gathered in a group, And when they firmly believed in their faith and were even willing to sacrifice themselves for the release of the evil god, things would become a little scary. If such an evil god really existed, it would definitely be a great threat to the Norland continent. Or rather, it would be a disaster once it appeared. Bolton was not a coward. As the chief officer of the Grey Temple's intelligence department, he knew better than anyone what it meant for Roland to pay so much attention to a matter and even list it as top secret. Go and interrogate all the guys we brought back at night. Not only do you want to know their actions and motives, but also their dreams. The real information might be in their dreams. Roland picked out a confession and pushed it to Bolton. Bolton picked up the confession. The main content was a ridiculous dream. A huge, indescribable object was trapped underground by countless chains. There was a cave thousands of meters tall underground and countless dark tunnels. That voice was calling out to him. He didn't know how valuable this ridiculous dream was, but he already knew what Roland's intentions were. The evil god behind these crazy people's dreams was the true goal of their investigation. Go ahead. We still have a lot of work to do, but we don't have much time left. Roland continued to look down at the confessions and said calmly, "Yes." Bolton turned and left the office. He didn't know how to explain it to his subordinates who were already nervous after being tortured by those guys, but the following interrogation might be even more torturous. The swaying red wine glass, the intoxicating red wine, and the intoxicating beauty couldn't get Meg drunk in the end. After placing Irina, who was in his arms, on the bed gently, and removing her jacket, Meg returned to his room smilingly. He locked the door, closed his eyes, and opened the mutton soup experience bag. This idiot. I'm so angry. In the room next door, Irina opened her eyes and clenched her fists angrily. Mutton soup could be found almost all over the country, but it had its own characteristics due to the different regions. The mutton soup recipe that the system provided to Meg was said to be a masterpiece that gathered the strengths of various families. Meg actually quite liked mutton soup, but this seemingly simple mutton soup also tested the chef's skills. The mutton had a strong, rank odor, and if it wasn't handled well, the soup would have a rank odor, making people stay away from it. The owners of the mutton restaurants that I complained about, could they be among the cursed chefs? Meg raised his eyebrows slightly, feeling that things had suddenly taken a turn for the worse. He wasn't a mean person, but he had higher standards than the average person. He also couldn't stand the attitude of the so-called internet-famous restaurants and old restaurants that didn't cook well with their hearts. He always believed that people shouldn't just say beautiful words. Since he had already spoken, he should speak the truth. Of course, such words might not sound as pleasant to the ears. Anyway, he never cared if others thought it was pleasant to the ears, just like how he couldn't control the mouths of those haters. So why couldn't he speak the truth? Host, please don't comfort yourself. The dish's completion rate has been set. Please enter the test field for the god of cookery as soon as possible. The system's voice sounded. System, can I apologize here? I feel that my words in the past were indeed a little too much. Why don't you start a live broadcast, and I'll apologize to those chefs that I've hurt. Meg said with a smile. Those chefs all expressed that they couldn't forgive you, the system replied. Meg rolled his eyes. As expected, he secretly raised his middle finger and said with some disdain, "Isn't it just a perfect mutton soup? You guys are so unambitious that you can't even protect the things left behind by your ancestors. I'll show you what a real mutton soup is." Then, Meg kicked open the door of the test field for the god of cookery. It was very happy inside. This spell formation. Novin stood beside the altar, looking at the spell formation with his brows tightly knitted. At the same time, he had to eliminate the whispers that kept ringing in his ears. Can it be solved? Crassus asked nervously. Novin shook his head with a serious expression and said, "It's very difficult. I don't know much about ancient spell formations. There's too little information left in the world, and the few ruins that are left are also very badly damaged. I'm afraid no one in this world has ever seen a complete ancient spell formation, let alone studied it." Crassus sighed and said, "If even you can't do it, then I'm afraid no one else can. Nothing is absolute. Perhaps there are people who have studied ancient spell formations. We can gather some spell formation masters to study this seal spell formation and see if we can find a breakthrough. Novin shook his head and took out a photo stone to record a corner of this seal spell formation. System, where's my sheep? We're such a big sheep. The next morning, Meg opened the fridge and roared with his eyes wide open. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1689. Meg looked at the empty spot in the fridge where the mutton was supposed to be. He couldn't help but widen his eyes. An ominous premonition rose from the bottom of his heart. Ding! The missing mutton has triggered a new mission. Host, please go to the blue grassland in the extreme cold of the northwest in 3 days to find and catch a kind of goat called the polar black goat. If the mission is successful, you will obtain the right to use the polar black goat as an ingredient and a mysterious gift. The system's voice sounded. Damn, you're doing it again. Meg rolled his eyes. He had a premonition that the system was up to something. Sure enough, it didn't ask him to go to the extreme cold of the northwest to pick up goat dung. However, he still had to fly to the extreme cold of the northwest to catch a goat. Blue grassland? Do you think I'm Grey Wolf? Meg rolled his eyes and said in a tough tone, the holiday is over. I don't dare to stand my customers up. If they curse me to be a customer who has always stood up by chefs in my next life, wouldn't I be in trouble? The 3-day countdown has started. If the mission has failed, the system will take back the right to use the mutton soup recipe, the system replied calmly. Meg frowned and kept silent for a long time. Then he silently raised his middle finger. Convex, who knew how many black goats he had personally slaughtered, how many goat bones he had chopped, and how many mutton slices he had made in order to make a mutton soup that satisfied his picky self. Just to make a bowl of thick, white, and fragrant mutton soup. He had wanted to get up early to prepare a bowl of warm and delicious mutton soup for everyone, but he didn't expect the system to make a dish of it. It's okay to do the mission, but at least give me the coordinates. The extreme cold of the northwest has a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers. What do you want me to find the blue grassland and catch the black goats for you? Meg complained in his heart. The blue grassland is very conspicuous in the extreme cold of the northwest. I believe the host can find it easily. As for the tracks of the polar black goat, the host may be able to get more useful information from the local herdsman. It's as good as not saying anything. Meg curled his lips. He didn't expect the system to give more hints. After thinking for a while, he wrote a leave of absence notice and hung it at the door. He was going to take another day off. Since he would have to go there sooner or later, it was better to do the mission earlier. Boss, why are you on leave again? Phyllis was the first one to arrive at the restaurant. After entering the door, she asked Meg with a puzzled look. I'll announce it when everyone is here, Meg said with a smile. Everyone arrived one after another, including Shirley, who had officially returned after recovering from her injuries. They all came to the restaurant. Everyone was puzzled by the fact that Meg had just taken a break yesterday, and today, Meg had released a notice to take a break again. Since you're all here, let me announce the reason for today's holiday. Meg looked at everyone and said with a smile, I think everyone has been too busy recently. We haven't had the chance to sit down and have a good chat. The new members also haven't had enough opportunities to get to know each other. This is a major flaw in the restaurant's team-building work. So today, I've decided to take a day off and organize a team-building event for everyone in the restaurant. We'll go to the blue grassland in the northwest to play. Amy's eyes lit up, and she said in surprise, Are we going to the grasslands to catch goats? Sure. Meg nodded with a smile. It should be very cold in the northwest now. Elizabeth said with some hesitation. The previous team-building event was at the Demon Islands. Everyone had a good time sunbathing and playing in the water. Then it's just right to go skiing, Meg said matter-of-factly. Catching goats wasn't a big deal. It might just take a little more time, so it was just right to bring everyone to participate in the team-building event. Angela and Jane weren't familiar with everyone, so it wasn't a bad idea to take this opportunity to improve their friendship. Skiing. Angela and Jane's eyes lit up. The Demon Islands were hot all year round, and they had never seen frost, let alone skiing. The others also showed great interest in this matter. I have something on today, so I won't be playing with you. Irina drank a bowl of porridge and waved to everyone. She then disappeared from the restaurant in a golden light. Meg knew that she was definitely worried about the thunderstorm mountains, so he didn't ask her to stay. He picked up his bowl and said, "All right, everyone, have your breakfast first and then get ready to head out." "Father, what about me? Can I skip class today and go catch goats?" Amy looked at Meg expectantly and asked, "Meg, do you like to catch goats?" Meg asked with a smile. Yes, yes. Goats are so cute. They must be delicious." Amy nodded and said. Meg smiled and patted Amy's head. "Master Julian probably won't have time to go to class today. You don't have to take leave. Amy can go with us." "That's great." Amy jumped up happily. It was great to play for 2 days in a row. After breakfast, Meg brought some snacks and seasonings before leading everyone out. Meg rented a 5th-grade flying mount, the Ironhead Eagle. This flying magical beast that used its head as a weapon almost made him a rare species. It had no other characteristics, but it had a strong carrying capacity. Its flying speed was comparable to a 7th-grade flying magical beast. Its weakness was that it wasn't windproof. This weakness wasn't a problem for Meg and the others. Barbara easily solved it with a windproof barrier. "Actually, I can take everyone there," Yabamiya said as they sat on the eagle's back. "We're out to play today. How can we let Mia tire herself out?" Meg shook his head with a smile. He wasn't a stingy boss. He looked at everyone and said with a smile, "The journey will take about 3 hours. Why don't we play werewolf?" "Werewolf?" Everyone looked at Meg in confusion. Yes, werewolf is a very interesting strategy game. The game is divided into 2 camps, the werewolf camp and the good guy camp. If all the werewolves are eliminated, the good guy camp wins. If all the clerics or civilians are eliminated, the werewolf camp wins. As for the specific rules, as a non-board game enthusiast, Werewolf was one of the few board games that he knew. It was also suitable for such a large group of people. The restaurant was usually busy. Although everyone worked together and lived in the same dormitory, they didn't have much time to communicate. A brand new game was quite a challenge for the ladies. However, amidst all the mistakes, the laughter never stopped. An intense strategy and reasoning game had become a self-destructing game. Between the truth and the lies, Mag, the game provider, had become the worst loser. "Wow, why is that grassland blue?" At this moment, Amy suddenly stood up and pointed into the distance. "Looks like we're here." Meg stood up and looked at the land that was gradually turning blue. His eyes lit up. He didn't expect there to be a blue grassland in the extreme cold of the Northwest. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1690. Yuval Spawn. How could the young master of the Lewis family be reduced to such a pathetic state for a woman? Can't you be a human? A middle-aged man with neatly combed hair outside, Mamie's pointed at the despondent Constantine with a pained expression. "Father, you don't understand. I like Miss Shirley. I'm even willing to give up everything for her. I don't care about being the young master of the Lewis family at all." The pale-faced Constantine said affectionately with a hand over his heart. Smack! Kurt raised his hand and slapped Constantine's face. He was shaking with anger as he said, "You call that liking her? You're just lusting after her body. You're despicable." Constantine staggered 2 steps back and looked at Kurt dejectedly. He shook his head and said, "No, it's not like that. She's different. She's different from those women." "Ha, different? Does she have 3 legs or horns on her head?" Kurt was so angry that he laughed. "I think you've lost your mind. You've lost your appetite for a woman whose whereabouts are unknown. If you continue to be like this, I'll chase you out of the house. I'll take it that I never had a son like you." Words are not enough to describe her beauty. "Father, no matter how you force me, I will never give up on her. She's my white moonlight. She's an irreplaceable woman," Constantine said with determination. He had no intention of backing down. "I didn't expect young Master Constantine, who's known as a veteran in love, to have such an affectionate side. It's really surprising. All the rich young masters pale in comparison to Mr. Mac. Isn't he asking for trouble if he wants to chase after Mamie's girl?" "That's true. I heard Mr. Mac has become the most charming man in Chaos City. The City Lord's record of 28 consecutive years has been broken for the first time. But it seems like we haven't seen Miss Shirley for a long time, right? The customers who were a little depressed because Mamie's was closed for the day couldn't help but discuss softly when they saw this scene. Kurt glared at Constantine angrily before getting into the horse-drawn carriage and leaving. Constantine sat at the entrance of the restaurant for a while before leaving in disappointment. The most painful love in the world was when you were about to give up and the other party suddenly appeared. Just as your hope was rekindled, she disappeared silently once again. His love for Miss Shirley was just like that. Miss Shirley, I'll always be waiting for you to come back. Next time, I won't miss you. Constantine murmured listlessly. The blue grassland was located in the extreme cold of the Northwest region. If it wasn't for a plant called blue silvergrass, its name probably wouldn't have appeared on the map. Along the way to the north, the earth was covered in ice and snow. The Northwest region was even colder. Other than ice and snow, there was almost nothing exposed to the outside, let alone any green vegetation. However, there was not a single trace of snow on the blue grassland. The blue-silver vegetation stretched as far as the eye could see. It made the eyes of those who were tired of the snowy scenery brighten. What a beautiful grassland! The grass is actually blue. Anna exclaimed in surprise. Then, could the goats be blue too? Amy poked her head out and scanned the area seriously, trying to find the existence of the goats. Elizabeth also looked down in surprise. She muttered, "The temperature here is higher than other places. It's like spring. Since we've encountered such a special place, let's go down and take a look." Meg rode the iron-head eagle down. He was also a little apprehensive. This grassland was so blue that it didn't look like they would be able to find the polar black goats no matter how you looked at it. Wearing a black leather jacket in such a blue ocean, wouldn't it be looking for food? As they descended, the scenery on the ground gradually became clearer. The blue ocean was formed by a type of light blue grass about 20 centimeters tall. Other than the blue grass, there were other plants growing in intervals. However, because they were not as dense as the blue grass, the entire grassland appeared blue. The huge shadow cast by the iron-head eagle caused the animals on the grassland to panic. A flock of blue goats ran wildly on the grassland. If they weren't close enough, they wouldn't be able to tell that there was a large flock of goats hidden on the grassland. "Wow, it's really blue goats!" Amy exclaimed in surprise. She was already rubbing a small fireball in her hand. "There really are blue goats. That's so special." The girls were also looking at the flock of goats in surprise. Goats were not rare animals, but blue goats were different. They had never heard of them before. This is the charm of biological evolution. The goats here have been through natural selection. From the accumulation of small mutations, the blue fur that could protect them was preserved. That's why there are blue goats. Meg wasn't too surprised. Biological evolution was a very miraculous thing. Moreover, there were more than 10 or 100 times more species on the Northern continent than there were on Earth. The girls didn't quite understand Meg's words, but that didn't stop them from thinking that Meg was very knowledgeable. Then, "Father, can we eat these goats?" Amy swallowed her saliva. Her eyes were full of anticipation. The blue silvergrass is a rather special plant. It's blue all year round, and it can generate heat by itself. That's why there's this special blue grassland. However, it's not poisonous, so the goats that live on blue silvergrass can also eat it. Meg nodded. When he went to rent a flying mount in the morning, Meg bought a map and a brief report on the blue grassland. Because there was almost nothing special about this grassland apart from the blue silvergrass, the report was very brief. It didn't even mention the polar black goats. That's great. Amy raised the small fireball in her hand. She was about to release an explosive fireball in the midst of the running goats to eat lunch. "Wait." Meg hurriedly stopped the little fellow. He shook his head with a smile and said, "Goats that die from the explosion will be very difficult to deal with. Furthermore, our target isn't this kind of goat, but a type of black goat. That's the most delicious goat on this grassland." "Black goat?" Amy retracted her hand. She stood on her tiptoes and looked around. She shook her head and said, "But there aren't even black rocks here. Where are the black goats?" Everyone also looked into the distance. On the vast, blue grassland, they could see all kinds of animals running past occasionally. However, they didn't see any black goats. There wasn't even a black wild boar. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1691. The iron-head eagle circled around the blue grassland. Meg focused all his attention on the area below, but he still could not find any trace of the polar black goats. If they really lived in the blue grassland and were about to become a food ingredient for Mamie's, then at least there should be an objective amount of them. It shouldn't be that hard to find, right? System, could it be that your information is wrong? Or did you lose your goats? Meg asked in his mind. Please complete the mission independently. The system replied. Meg rolled his eyes. If the goats weren't in the blue grassland, you would be a dog. Please respect the system. The system is not a dog system. The system said seriously. Hee hee, I praised you for raising the goats well, so you're a shepherd dog. Meg laughed. Of course, the system is an all-round god of cookery system, shepherd. The system's voice paused and suddenly became angry. Isn't a shepherd dog also a dog? I don't know if a shepherd dog is a dog, but you're a real dog. Meg rolled his eyes. In such a big grassland, who knows where the system raised the goats? Look, there are tents there. It seems like there are shepherds. Yabamia pointed to the right and said. Meg looked in the direction of her finger. It was already near the northwest border of the grassland. In the distance, there was a tall, snowy mountain. The melted snow from the snowy mountain converged into a river, meandering into the grassland. The tents sewn from various animal skins were set up along the river's banks. Since they're shepherds, then let's go down and take a look. Maybe they know where to catch the goats. Meg had an idea and signaled the iron-head eagle to descend. Woo! The shrill sound of a horn came from the shepherd's tents. The women and children ran back into the tents. The men held their longbows and spears and came to the front of the tents. They looked at the giant eagle that swooped down with vigilance and fear. In the blue grassland, they had never seen such a huge eagle. The snow eagles they raised were not even as big as one of its claws. However, they had nowhere to retreat. Behind them were their homes and loved ones. Chief, what's that? A young man looked at the old man standing in front of him and asked in a trembling voice. It might have come from the back of the snow mountain. Don't panic. If its target is the sheep, let it eat. If its target is the tent, we have to stop it even if it has to die. Eddie said in a low voice. Yes, the herdsmen replied in unison. However, the giant eagle didn't directly rush towards the tent. Instead, it circled around and slowly landed on a nearby mound. Immediately after, a group of people dismounted from the giant eagle's back. Chief, look, there's someone on the eagle's back. Those people don't seem to be hostile towards us. When the herdsmen saw this scene, they were all shocked. However, their expressions also relaxed a lot. Don't let your guard down. We still can't be sure if they are good or bad. Eddie said in a low voice. His eyes were as sharp as a falcon's as he stared at the group of people dismounting from the eagle's back. There were a total of 12 people, 1 man, 9 women, and 2 children. Judging from their attire, they didn't seem to belong to the grassland. Being able to tame such a giant eagle as a mount, they definitely weren't ordinary people. They were just an ordinary nomadic tribe on the grassland. How could they afford to offend such people? They seem to be very afraid of us. Amy hugged Ugly Duckling and looked at the herdsmen who were holding bows and spears in the distance with confusion. We are clearly so cute. Meow, meow. Ugly Duckling acted cute in her arms. Amy glanced at it and said without hesitation, That doesn't include you. Meow. Ugly Duckling was instantly discouraged. It rolled its eyes and lost its dream. We are considered uninvited guests. It's normal for them to be vigilant. We just have to act normal later. Meg smiled as he led the group in the direction of the tents. These herdsmen didn't look very different from herdsmen from other places. The blue-silver grass provided them with a rich grassland that was hard to find in the northwest, and the snow water solved their drinking water problem. However, perhaps because of the blue silver grass, these herdsmen's skin had a tinge of blue in addition to being tanned all year round. However, it wasn't to the extent of the Pandora natives. They were basically no different from humans. Stop! Who are you people? Why are you here? Eddie shouted loudly. Meg stopped about 20 meters away from those herdsmen and said with a smile, "Hello, we are here for a holiday. We were attracted by this blue grassland. We have no ill intentions." He was originally worried that these herdsmen didn't know the common language, but it seemed like this older herdsman was proficient in it. Eddie sized up Meg. This young man didn't look like a powerful person. His physique wasn't even as good as the young people in the tribe, and he wasn't equipped with a sword. His smile was gentle, and he didn't look like a bad person. Beside him stood a little girl of about 4 or 5 years old, holding a strange little thing in her arms. Behind him was a group of beautiful women. Yes, very beautiful women. The grassland couldn't produce such beautiful women. Whether it was the cold wind blowing from the snowy mountains or the long day of scorching sun, they all made the women in the grassland lose their exquisiteness. Of course, to be able to have such a group of beautiful women meant that this man must have a very honorable identity. He was definitely not someone a small tribe like theirs could provoke. This was the principle he learned when he was young and adventuring outside. The herdsmen looked at the women behind the man and were a little stunned. This was a beautiful scenery that had never been seen on the grassland, and it was also a beauty that they might never see in their lives. After confirming that the other party wasn't hostile and wasn't someone their tribe could provoke, Eddie put away his longbow and signaled the herdsmen to lower their guard. He put one hand in front of his chest and bowed slightly to Meg. He said respectfully, "Honorable guests, welcome." When the herdsmen saw how humble Eddie was, they hurriedly put away their inappropriate expressions and gazes. They lowered their heads and bowed nervously. "No need to be so polite. We just happened to pass by. We heard that the barbecued mutton on the grassland is very good, so we wanted to try it." Meg said with a smile, Yes, we want to eat sheep, the kind that can run." Amy went forward and pointed at the sheep that were leisurely grazing in the grassland not far away. What a cute little girl. The herdsmen's eyes lit up when they saw Amy. The herdsmen's children grew up on horseback and crawled and rolled in the grassland. They were all little devils in the mud. They had never seen such a delicate little girl who looked like a snowman. Eddie's eyes lit up, and he patted his chest confidently. "Barbecued mutton, this is what the Buck tribe is best at. Honorable guests, please come in. I'll ask my tribesmen to slaughter the mutton and roast it for you personally." Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1692. The girls all looked at Meg. There was a top chef here. Was Eddie going to show off his skills in roasting mutton in front of Meg? Meg nodded expectantly. "Then I'll have to trouble you." Most of the herdsmen in the grasslands were experts in roasting meat. Regardless of whether it was the whole roasted mutton in Inner Mongolia or the red willow roasted meat of the Labu people, as long as they were lucky, they could always taste delicacies that could not be tasted in the city. Meg had learned how to roast mutton skewers and roast pig's eyes, but he did not dare to say that he was an expert in roasting meat. He had only learned a little because of the system. If he could learn a thing or two from a real expert, it would naturally be best. The biggest change to him after coming to this world was that he had learned to humble himself. In the past, he had always felt that he did not have any goals to strive for in this life, and that he only lived to do as he pleased. But it was different now. He had truly seen the depth of the chef profession. It was like a vast sea of stars. If he wanted to become a bright star in it, he had to constantly learn and improve. "Guests, this way, please." Eddie led Meg and the others into a large tent. The interior of the tent was very simple. The blue-silver grass on the ground had been cut, and the mud was simply compacted. There was only one heatable brick bed. The families had brought in small stools, and they barely managed to gather 12 of them. The sheepskin tent blocked out the wind and was quite warm, but there was a slight stench of livestock. This was not a big deal to the herdsmen. Cows and sheep rolled around in the field, so they could not avoid this smell. But to Meg and the others, this smell was somewhat unfriendly. "Distinguished guests, please wait here for a moment. I will roast mutton for everyone. The whole roasted mutton is the main feast, but it will take a long time to roast. I will roast some mutton for all of you to eat in a while. Eddie arranged everything for Meg and the others, and then had a few clever girls accompany them in the tent. It's the smell of sheep. Amy sniffed and looked around. She did not seem to dislike it. Not long after, a few herdsmen came in with ceramic bowls and handed bowls of steaming goat milk to Meg and the others. They smiled and gestured for them to drink. Although these herdsmen did not speak the common language, their warm smiles were infectious. It was hard to refuse their hospitality, or perhaps the thick, warm milk fragrance was too tempting. Everyone picked up the goat's milk and drank it. Meg had drunk goat's milk on the grassland. The goat's milk was processed by the herdsmen, and even after it was boiled, it still had a bit of rank odor. It was not as good as one would imagine. However, the goat's milk this time was somewhat out of his expectations. The rank odor of the goat milk had been handled very well, and he almost couldn't feel its existence. Or it could be said that the goat milk itself didn't have any rank odor. It was warm, fresh, and sweet, and was completely different from the goat milk he had drunk in the past. Once it entered his stomach, he felt warm all over, and the fragrance lingered in his lips and teeth. Good milk. Meg's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but praise. Camilla and Angela looked up at Meg at the same time. Good goat's milk, Meg added without blushing or skipping a beat. It was a close call. He almost said something that his mother didn't allow him to say. Gulp, gulp. The delicious goat's milk quickly entered everyone's stomachs. The originally restrained feeling was also broken by this warm bowl of goat's milk. Seeing this scene, the herdsmen also smiled proudly. The Buck tribe only produced the best goat's milk. Amy put down the empty bowl and licked the corner of her mouth with her little tongue. She expectantly said, "The goat's milk is so good. The roast goat must be very delicious too." Meg passed the empty bowl to the herdsman to express his gratitude. Then he stood up and said, "I want to see them roast the goat. Do you want to come?" "I want to go," Amy said as she raised Ugly Duckling. Meow. Ugly Duckling, who had just fallen asleep, squinted its eyes with a puzzled expression. "I want to go too. Big Sister Shirley, let's go too." Anna stood up and held Shirley's hand. This was her first time coming to the grassland. She wanted to go out and play. It would be even better if she could ride a horse. "All right," Shirley stood up. "Let's go too. It must be great to be able to play on the grassland," Mia said with a smile as she pulled Elizabeth up. "All right, let's go then." Meg nodded and led them out of the tent. Although this place was close to the snowy mountains and the temperature was relatively lower, the temperature was still about 10 degrees Celsius because of the blue-silver grass. To the people who came from Chaos City, which was covered in ice and snow, this temperature was not a problem at all. Furthermore, the fresh air on the grassland, the snowy mountains that were half covered by the clouds in the distance, and the blue sky were all very refreshing. Compared to the dim tent that had a slight smell of goat, everyone obviously preferred the outdoors. Meg used his body language to express that they wanted to see the process of roasting the goat. The herdsman who understood him immediately brought them to the back of the tent. A group of herdsmen was busy slaughtering, bleeding, and skinning the goat. Not far away, a few herdsmen had started a fire and were throwing thickwood into it. The arrival of Meg and the rest immediately attracted everyone's attention. Many people stopped what they were doing and smiled at Meg and the rest in a friendly manner. Eddie had just bled a goat when he heard the commotion. He put down the knife and turned around to look at Meg and the rest in surprise. "Honorable guests, why are you here? Please wait in the tent. The roast goat will be done very soon." "It's all right. We're more interested in the process of roasting the goat, so we want to see how you roast the goat personally," Meg said with a smile. His gaze was already attracted to the black goat that was still struggling after its neck was slit. He had slaughtered thousands of polar black goats in the god of cookery's space last night. With just one look, he could be 100% sure that the black goat that was about to die was the target that he had been looking for. "System, come out and take a look. I found this polar black goat," Meg said proudly. He had really searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance. Before he could even ask, the goat had come knocking on his door. The search for the polar black goat has been completed. Host, please personally capture a polar black goat. Only then will the mission be considered complete, the system replied. Okay. Meg agreed in a relaxed tone. Since these herdsmen could capture a polar black goat, they definitely knew where to find them. Capturing one was naturally not difficult at all. Why is this goat different from the ones we saw just now? Could it be that it's not a breed from the grasslands? Meg walked forward and asked curiously as he looked at the black goat. You have a good eye? This black goat is indeed not a goat from our grasslands. It only appears on the snowy mountains and can run on the steep cliffs as if it was flying. It's extremely difficult to capture. However, its meat is incomparable to that of ordinary mutton. It's simply the best among goats, Eddie said with a smile. This one was caught by the trap we set up on the mountain yesterday. We're preparing to roast it for our guests. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.